Hello, hello, hello. Can you see me? You're muted, man. Oh, I'm muted. I'm muted in Discord. I'm a genius. Hello, mate. How are you?
Good. It was a good laugh.
Couldn't help but notice, despite some inflammatory comments you've made just moments ago on social media, claiming that you're a better org now. Couldn't help but notice the seahorse in the background.
Yeah, no, Tia's still a great orc, but like, there's always better, you know.
Absolutely. But are you not reenacting sort of the similar thing where you're kind of staying on your ex's couch right now? Like, what's going on?
No, I am a little bit. I'm mostly here for the free food though.
Is the food good? What kind of food are we talking about?
Tia's a chef that makes pretty good food, I would say. Like, she cooks something new every day.
That's fair enough. And how are you doing in life in general? It's been a few months since we've had an actual sit down and spoke. I think the last time I saw you was at First Stand.
Yeah, the last time I did anything good was at first stand, or
Yeah.
like before first stand, not even at first
I
stand.
wouldn't say that First Stand was particularly good, to be fair, but
Yeah, no, that was pretty dog shit.
if you've got different standards, I suppose it's okay.
Yeah, no, first stand was pretty dog shit, but that was the last time I was doing good, like career-wise, I guess you could say.
Absolutely. When the stock was at a decent level. Before we go on to anything, I mean, I suppose we're going to be wrestling with a lot of topics tonight, but I wanted to go back to the beginning of your life because you were a collegiate wrestler at one point, weren't you? You dedicated most of your life to wrestling.
Not collegiate, but I was a wrestler. I did wrestle for 12 years.
Talk to me about that, because that's something that maybe not a lot of people know about you.
Um, I don't know, just at a young age, I always did sports. You know, I did American football, wrestled, soccer, baseball, track, basketball, like literally every sport you can probably think of. My parents put me and my siblings in, and wrestling is just one that stuck with me. So I did that all the way up until like junior year of high school. I did from like 4 to 16, 4 to 17, somewhere around there.
How many siblings do you have actually? I didn't know that you had siblings.
I have an older brother and a sister.
And were you any? How good were you at wrestling? Like, give us an idea. Like, were you like Rey Mysterio or like?
Um, I wasn't anything insane. Like I went to States one time, so I was like above average, but I wouldn't have went on to like a D1 school or anything and like crushed kids. I was just probably just like a little bit above average.
Yeah, I suppose depending on the season you play in, D1 is good or not. I mean, like obviously ELO inflation over the years means that it's not that impressive nowadays.
Uh, well, a little bit different of a ranking within the collegiate scene.
Oh, I'm sure. Anyway, I won't stop and bore you for the details. I'm sure that lots of people would like to hear about how those things are different. But in any case, I kind of wanted to get an idea because you're someone that comes from traditional sport. I had a long conversation with Grabs a few episodes ago, and he talked about how he sees marked differences in players who have engaged in that kind of sporting environment. They're way easier to like get into the structure. They understand like the idea of like there's no I in team, like that like whole cliche or whatever. It's the thing of
Hmm.
like you can kind of understand that like sometimes it's not just about you and you've got to put other people first and you're only as strong as your weakest member. Do you feel like that environment is something that's led to you to that mentality or
Um, I think me just playing sports just made me the competitor I am today. To be completely honest with you, like I did, like I mean, I was in countless interviews with other teams this offseason, and the thing I was honestly repeating myself was I hate losing more than I want to win. Just because I fucking hate losing. Like I'm such a competitor where just even losing pisses me off, you know? Like getting sixth place to split, losing to 100 Thieves, it pissed me off so hard. Um, and I guess to answer more your question, like I'd rather win and look bad than lose and look good.
it's interesting and talk to me about that kind of because you've put it in quite polemically like rough terms in terms of like it's strong. Like I hear when you say you fucking hate losing, and I know from speaking to you that you're quite like a. I mean, anyone knows like they see you after a game, or I've had you after games and you've lost. It's like even though you know me and you know that we're here for a good time and you value entertainment, there's no getting you out of that mood when you've lost. So I
Yeah.
kind of wanted to like just say it bluntly. Like I feel like you're someone that doesn't mind saying it. what kind of headspace are you going into after a loss? Like,
Um, normally I'm pissed off, just to be honest. Like whether it's about like my gameplay or like I think one of my teammates played really bad or like whatever it is. Like normally it's generally about my gameplay. Um, I'm just like fuck man, if I did this better, we could have won this game. If I change this around, blah blah blah. And it's certainly not even after like a game per se. It's more so after like the series concludes. I'm not like tilted if we lose game
yeah,
one in
no,
the
of
best of
course.
five, but like I'll be tilted after we lose the best of five.
Absolutely. And I suppose in talking about that, it's kind of like you have embodied over the last few years, you've kind of come into this role. And the reason I wanted to bring up wrestling is that so much of what you do, although you never ask the performer to reveal his tricks, but at least from my perspective, it feels like so much of what you do is wrapped up in a kind of a almost a WWE like mythos. You've wanted to be a villain at times. I wonder if you could comment on that. I mean, obviously, like I said, you don't want Rey Mysterio to ever take off the mask, but how much are you trying to be a villain in the LCS?
Um, to some extent, yeah. Like it was. I don't know if Jan will even remember this conversation, but it was the night I got promoted. It was me and him. We're sitting like he's literally right here in this chair, and he had a conversation with me. He was just giving me advice, and he said like, "No one knows who you are. You can basically like reinvent yourself." And so I thought about that a lot, and like a lot of this is some of my personality, just like maximize out like exponential like to the 10. Um, so like it's nice to be a villain, but it's also like this is generally how I also think. I don't care about pissing people off or anything like that. Like, coming from real sports and everything, it's like the amount of people who just shit talk you out in the open, and like if you're losing, that feels like shit. Someone calls you a fucking loser when they're pinning you to the ground. It's like fuck, man, that feels terrible. And then you kind of do the same back to them when you pin them to the ground. Um, so like I know how it feels from like that standpoint, and then going into this scene, it's like why shouldn't I do this? This is like something that I've done before in my like like wrestling career to some extent. Like I've always typed in like solo queue and stuff like that, so it's no different now.
You talked about reinventing yourself, and obviously prior to going and being promoted, most people would know you for Maryville University, maybe some solo queue stuff, champions queue in previous years, kind of like a collegiate player, challenger player, but not really knowing much about you. What was APA's your reputation like before this time?
Just toxic solo queue, bro. That's probably about it. Like if you ask anyone back in like I don't know what season 8, season 9, you know, season 10, like somewhere around there, and ask them about me, it's probably just like good ASOL one trick, good ASOL tally 2 trick, whatever it is, but really fucking toxic to me in solo queue.
And talk to me about toxicity because we come from I come from a region in Europe where toxicity is kind of it's almost an art form in some ways. There's so many different avenues that it could take. I will say it's very bad nowadays. There's not a lot of creativity into it. What kind of toxicity are we talking? Is this toxicity that has intelligence behind it? Are you just running it down? Are you just passive aggressive? What kind of a toxic person were you in solo queue?
Um, I mostly was just like blaming people in solo queue, like jungler ganks mid. I don't know, he's playing, let's say Jarvan. He misses his EQ. Probably like flaming him for missing the EQ.
What kind of stuff are you saying? Like, give me an idea. Like, just imagine yourself.
I don't know. I
Jarvan
was just
ganks EQ.
probably calling him a shitter, like just a noob. Like I don't think it's anything. Like I wasn't telling him his mom's dead or something.
Yeah, okay. So it's
I
not
was just
creative though,
just
because
calling him
like
a noob.
I don't believe that you were typing you're a noob. There's no one ever types you're a noob unless you're like 45 years
That's
old.
not true. I genuinely type you're a noob. That avoids the detection system. You
Okay.
can't type anything too bad without getting banned.
Okay, interesting. So I'm getting an idea. It's just kind of hit them semi hard and then kind of just leave it. It's not like you're not. Are you the kind of person like? Are you like the kind of guy that like you full mute when things gets rough, and then when something bad goes wrong, you unmute and you say, guys, I think we should be playing around me, and then colon D and then mute again.
Um, Now I kind of am because I'm not really toxic in solo queue anymore, and I just want to like win or improve or whatever. But like before I even cared about going pro, I would just flame and like I was wishing and like hoping for the conversation to unfold, and like that shitty Jarvan that ganks mid, he types back to me, why'd you fucking miss your RA charm or whatever?
So you were flaming people and hoping they would type back at you.
Yeah, I mean that was the fun of it.
Oh my god, this is a really unique insight into the psychology here. And thank you so much. I feel like so many of these interviews, we spend the first hour trying to unravel this, and you're just immediately revealing what's wrong with you. And I really commend immediately revealing what's wrong with you, and I commend you for that. Being a toxic player in solo queue, one of the things that people don't talk about is it can have kind of ramifications for years going forward. I mean, famously, Caps was quite toxic way back in the day, and that meant that a lot of people didn't really like him when he came into the league. There's lots of players over the years that have kind of it's damaged them in some ways because it's like you piss off pros, you piss off people in the scene. Were there any kind of like issues you had with players that then became like awkward when you came up to the LCS, like people you had beef with previously in solo queue?
Um, I wouldn't say at the LCS level, because when I started to get into academy, I like became a lot less toxic because I was like, hey, these guys are probably gonna like potentially gonna be my teammates in the future. Should probably not call them all shitters and noobs and like piss them off. Um, but like jumping from amateur to academy took really long, probably just because I pissed a lot of like the current group of the academy players off.
And how did you kind of navigate that? Because it's like there's only so many sorries you can say, I suppose, or I suppose you probably don't even want to say sorry at a certain capacity because you probably still believe their shit anyway.
What do you mean navigate it?
Well, it's like you come into the league and it's like all these people are pissed off at you, and you can feel it's like stopping your progression up through it. I suppose for you, was it difficult to kind of have like how do you navigate that? Did you say sorry to anyone, or like you just kind of just like, I'm just gonna grind, like I'm not taking back what I said?
Um, no, I didn't take back anything that I said because like I don't know, I meant it then. I probably still mean it now. Like I don't recall what I was saying, but probably still mean it now. You're probably still shitters. Um, but I think the only thing I really changed was I just became less toxic, and like the whole reason I went to Maryville is because I took a gap year after high school, and I was telling my parents like I want to go pro. Um, if I can take a gap year, which they let me take a gap year after a couple conversations with them. Um, like I tried to go pro, and then I didn't go pro, so that's why I ended up going Maryville.
Interesting. And talk to me about that time kind of in academy and at Maryville because you're very quick to shout out Maryville, which is kind of a rarity in terms of I feel like in esports so much of the time you're kind of brought into the subsumed vapid system of just forgetting everything where you came from, and you kind of basically what I'm saying is esports players aren't very good at saying thank you in general, but you always seem to be very quick to thank Maryville. So clearly you had a great time there. I wonder if you could shed a bit of light on your time there.
Um, I mean, it was like the best way to put it is the year, probably like the 2 or so years since I graduated high school and during high school, because like I graduated during the COVID year, so it was like online, just fake schooling, basically. Um, all I did was play League every day, all day, no matter what. And then you, like, I'll just be honest, I did not get much personal interaction. Like, I stopped talking to my high school friends. Like, of course, my only friends were like Discord friends at the time, and I did not get much interaction with people. So then going from like that version of my life to Maryville, where I'm in person with literally 10 teammates and a new coach, and like I'm at a college campus meeting, classmates, like peers, and all these new people. They just made me socially a better person and like understand myself more. And like I think my like group of guys that I was there with, like to be honest, a bunch of older guys who just were like veterans of the scene in some way or another, and they gave me a lot of advice, helped me out, and just made me become a better person.
And do you credit that because you talked about kind of that period of time being a time where you were way less toxic? I presume that coincides with kind of just a more healthy approach to life in general.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely, and that's really interesting to hear because I feel like it's a topic that's really passionate to me as someone that owns a team in ERL, obviously at a lower level. But I suppose ERL is kind of somewhat similar to collegiate in some ways. But often I've worked with players, not to throw any people under the bus, but it's like you can just tell that because of the way that they're really toxic and they've got all these mindsets. And it's like a thing where I feel like it's such a wider issue that lots of like, I mean, how often do you see like a 16-year-old kid in like GM or Challenger or maybe like 17, 18 years old, and they're just the most toxic piece of shit on the planet? And you're just like, well, this is clearly about more than just the game, and there's other stuff going
Yeah.
on and whatnot. So it's really nice to hear you speak about this because it's like a perspective on that kind of development outside of the game.
No, I mean that happens all the time. Like anytime there's a new, like I don't know, younger solo queue prodigy, generally they're always toxic. They're always toxic pieces of shit because like I mean league's a competitive game where you don't really have control over 80% of your team. So like even if you're playing well, you can still lose games, and it probably pisses you off. Pisses off everyone. Like even like anyone who plays ranked gets pissed off at the game every once in a while, I presume. And then you look at like some immature 15, 16, 17-year-old or whatever who like all they do is play League. Like that's who I was. And I don't know. I literally just think to myself like I just give those people grace because like I was no better than them at the time, and I
Yeah.
just say like hopefully they'll I don't know. It's literally just growing up. Like literally, just hopefully they'll grow up after like however many years.
I wonder if it's comfortable with you. If it's not, then obviously we can immediately move on. But you talked about that period of time when you just before you went in there and you kind of just all you were doing is playing League and you kind of became isolated completely from friends and just kind of everything else. And I can relate to that heavily because I was doing all of that, but with no, I wasn't even good at the game, so it's even worse. I wonder if you could talk about that time because I can presume that took quite a toll on your mental health and stuff like that. But it is quite a unique experience. So I wondered if you could talk about it in a way that maybe would make people understand that what going through that feels like on a day to day.
Um, well, at first it was just like a complete drive to come pro. Like I really, 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 really wanted to go pro. Like even though I didn't care about going pro beforehand, like I still loved League. I started playing League at like 13 or somewhere around there, like 12, 13, 11, some age like that. And I always loved the game, even as a younger kid, even when I didn't care about pro. And like when I figured out that the path to going pro was like, um, like a viable path, I guess. I really want to do it because I've played games all my life and everything. So I put everything I couldn't delete. And so my day would be like I wake up, I'd probably play some solo queue, you know, brush my teeth after because I had like terrible hygiene. What's it called? Um, forgetting the word. Where you do it often.
Routine?
Yeah, terrible hygiene routine. Thank you.
Gotcha.
And then I'd like eat a little bit, and then I'd play League, and then I'd eat a little bit again, then I'd play League, and then all of a sudden it's like 3 a.m. and then I'd like go to sleep. And then like at the start that was fun because you're 17-year-old some kid like playing League. That's all you have to do. But then like after a few months, it's like I don't know. You just people like human interaction, and the only human interaction I was getting was me as like an angsty teen with my parents. And like I love my parents now, but at the time I was like what's it called? Just upset with them, just as an angsty teen is.
Yeah, but I can imagine at that time it's like this thing where I see your mum constantly on social media and being very supportive. I think she's even in the chat right now, for example. But it's like a thing
Probably.
where it's a thing where from their perspective you can only imagine in retrospect. It's like, oh wow, our kid is just on the PC all the time. He doesn't speak to his friends anymore. He's not showering. He's not brushing his teeth, and he just plays League all day. So it must have been like quite a scary thing for them. But I suppose at that age you're not really there's no rationale to them not understanding that from your perspective. So I
Mhm.
suppose that probably caused a lot of conflict at the time.
Yeah, I think like the deal I made with them was I had 1 year to go pro, and then they ended up giving me like a year and then like a semester because it was like potentially I go pro in that 2021 year or like going into the 2022 year, there was a potential I go pro. But then since I didn't, that's why I decided to go to Maryville, which was like just our deal, I guess.
Maryville seems a bit cheeky though, because it's like, oh, I'm not going to go pro, but I am also going to go to a uni that has like an esports team and whatnot. So would I be right in saying it was like kind of like a, well, I've given up, but also I'm going to be around the thing I want to do and just see what happens, or had you fully given up at that time?
I told myself when I went to Maryville, I would try really hard that 2022 year, and then if I didn't make it pro, then is when I would like start taking college like actually serious. And then like going into Maryville, like I mean, it was really easy to convince my parents. So I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to a school with a full ride scholarship because of like I'm sure you at least know a little bit of how expensive
Yeah, yeah,
school in America can be,
yeah, of course.
and like telling them that they're like, oh shit, that sounds great. It wasn't really much contest from them.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. And then obviously you play there for a while, and how does it go in that year? You're obviously playing. You played. I forget what the tournament is. It's the one with all the colleges, but you play that alongside presumably NACL at that time, or
Um, so Maryville wasn't in the
CLOL.
academy at the
That's it.
time.
That's the one, right?
Yeah, CLOL. So we played CLOL and we played Tier 3. And the way it worked then was the top Tier 3 teams could face against the top Tier 2 teams. I think it was like Proving Grounds if I recall correctly.
Okay.
Um, didn't do like we made it to those tournaments, like we made it to the Tier 2 tournaments, but we just got shit on. It's like NA going to Worlds, you just get shit on. Um, and then we ended up losing CLOL as well. But I don't know, the way the team was ran was kind of like weird at the time. We used all 10 players. It wasn't like a starting roster, even though I think some players were just better. But that's just how the team was ran. So I think we should have won CLO that year, but we were kind of snubbed just with how everything was ran. But then like overall, like the year was okay. Like I didn't win anything, but I think I stood out pretty well. Like I got rank 1 a couple times that year. Um, and then I really stood out at the end of the 2022 year. Yeah, 2020. I really stood out at the end of the 2022 year because of the tryouts I did. Like there was a lot of academy public tryouts that they were having, and it was basically like if you got me on your team, like just won.
When you say they were public, like people were able to watch these, or
Yeah, like streamed. Like TO for example, TO did like not everything was public. Some games were private, but like I would at least half the games were public, and I had like an 85%, like 90 some percent win rate during the time of the tryout. So it was literally just like whoever had me on the team won, and if I didn't win, it was probably because someone was completely griefing me.
and how did you? Because presumably that was maybe. Would I be right in saying that was a spike in form? Or had you just
Yeah.
gotten that good at that time? Where did this spike in form come from? Because often when you speak to players, it's difficult for them to highlight the period where they got really good. But it sounds like you went from being like potentially like above average, a little bit of an outlier, to being like, oh wow, who the fuck is this guy out of nowhere?
Well, I think in the 2021 year when I was just like in the gap year, and then the 2022 year at Maryville is probably the 2 years where like you really, I mean, I want to say like I guess yeah, I guess spikes is a good word. Where I really spiked in just skill. A lot of it, honestly, to me, just came down to like I put so much time into the game. Like even though I was out of college, I took like 4 classes my first semester, like just barely enough to stay full time, and they're like shitty easy classes because first year classes. So all I did was play League, and
How many
then of
games were you
course during my
clocking in
gap
like a
year,
season? Like,
um, I can check for you if you want, but I don't actually know the number.
sure. With the amount that you've made it sound like you're playing it, it sounds like a crazy amount.
It was a lot, yeah. Way into the thousands. Like even this season, I've played like 1,500 games of solo queue games, which I think is a lot, and that's on top of like full-time league and like traveling and all that stuff.
But presumably, because I watch you nowadays and you hate solo queue. Like I watch you play and you don't like playing it at all. Did you have a lust for playing solo queue back then, or was it just you kind of just it's just your job? I have to do this. How do you approach solo queue?
Um, it was literally just the desire to improve. Like even now, like I hate solo queue now more because it's just I'm better than I was then. Like
Okay.
before, I would compare myself to solo queue players, but now I just get pissed off at even like the good challenger players because I'm like, fuck, these guys are dog shit. But even then, um, I didn't particularly enjoy it. I was just like, I just really want to be good. Like this is really what I want to do. But also like, I don't want to say like I don't enjoy it at all. Like playing
No,
League is
of
still
course not.
fun.
Of course not.
It's still a game after all. Like you still have fun moments. Just you're also competing, so you're not having fun all the time when you're like losing or whatever. I can't find the amount of games. I can't be bothered to them. But like well over like 2,000, 3,000, like substantial amount of games.
That's fair enough. That's very fair enough. Your camera's gone out of focus a little bit. Not sure why. Oh, he knows the
Fix it?
trick. Has it fixed it? No, not quite.
No, so,
Come on, genius,
I
work
don't
it
know.
out.
So, I don't know how.
This is what this is what the graphic looked like before you got announced for C9, mate. It was it was blurred.
What the hell?
Okay,
Is
you're
that better?
back. Okay, nice, you're back.
Nice.
So we talked about solo queue a little bit there, and obviously, but I kind of wanted to get an insight into because presumably when you go to Maryville, and then even when you're kind of playing in some of these teams, is when you start to get a real sense of structure. Because the more serious a team gets, the more regimented structure is, and even if it's not the best in the world, like you probably get an idea of like VOD reviews and stuff like this. But it sounds like you were very dedicated to self-improvement prior, and I think coming from a sporting environment, it is like I did judo growing up, and it's like a thing where you do kind of get an idea of what structure in terms of improvement was like. So I wonder, in those period of time where you're playing thousands of games, trying to go pro in 2021, 2022 too, how rigid was your structure, and how good were you at knowing how to get better?
Um, not as good as I think I am now, but a lot of it was just like a lot of it back then was more so me just copying good players back then. Like I would try and watch a lot of the league, like in queues, because any queue times can get pretty fucking long sometimes.
Who are you watching? Who are
Um,
you modeling your game off of?
like back then, it was, I mean, all the same goats that there are now. You know, like Baker Caps, Chovy. Um, I watched a lot more EU mids. Like I remember watching a lot of Larson because I thought Larson was good back then, even though he turned out to be a shitter too. Um,
Okay, strong words, fair enough.
but honestly, I just watched like a lot of League as well, and I would just like see people do picks. Like, of course, I kept to my like selected champion pool, I guess you could say, at the time. But like, if anyone ever played those champions, I would instantly watch that game, see what they did, be like, I would do this better, and then I would see what they would do better,
Hmm.
just compare and contrast.
And you said at the time you sort of a not necessarily a two trick, but the two champions you were known for were Talia and Aurelion Sol, if I'm correct, yeah?
Yeah.
And what gravitated? I mean, especially Aurelion Sol, I think is the one that people really associate with you. What gravitated you towards these champs?
Um, I literally just thought Asa was cool. That's it.
That's an amazing answer. But
He's just a space dragon that's fucking cool. So I played him.
you presumably played it pre rework as well, right?
Yeah, like right when he came out.
And then because talk to me, remind me actually, I can't quite remember in terms of the history. Was the champion quite a lot different before it got reworked? And it kind of somewhat functions the same, right?
Um, he had like the 3 stars that orbit around him, if you
Yeah.
remember,
Yeah.
and like that was kind of his whole like niche, I guess.
Dude,
Like he was just
I'm really sorry to have to do this. I need to take a 2-minute break to use the bathroom. Otherwise, I'm gonna piss myself on live. I've never had to do this before. I really apologize.
it's okay, it's
So
okay.
sorry, chat. You can entertain people if you'd like for the brief
I'll
moment.
entertain chat. How's everyone doing in this fine interview? You guys all enjoying it? Everyone, make sure they hydrate. Drink some water, guys. We gotta all start piss maxing like DonJake. Fuck me, what the fuck I do? Who's the biggest intern in a name? Me. Especially me in solo queue. Do not check my solo queue deaths. An Unk being my coach? Bro, I'd Unks this entire year. I'd fucking Core and Impact to both 30-year-olds on my team. You were Larson? I don't know, I've never seen Larson before. But I'm like a pretty big person, so. I don't really gym too much now, but I used to a lot. But I'm a fat fuck right now. I need to get back to the gym. I've been. Yeah, Kespa Cup's gonna be fun. And yeah, C9 will have us do gym. I don't know how often. I think it's once a day. So that'll be fun. That'll be good for me. I can get fit again. Yes, your username should be that. I think I'll keep the beard. I've had a few months to grow it out, and I think it looks good. The only reason I'll shave the beard is for a mustache. But that might be like later on down the line. You know, next international. But I'm on a team with white men now this split, so I'm gonna try to convince them to all have mustaches. I'll give Sven and Vulcan and Dom and Anero to all have mustaches with me. With the mustache team. Yeah, we'll give Thanatos a fake mustache. We'll give Thanatos and Blabber some fake mustaches. You know, this Dom guy needs to wear a beanie because he's gonna agree with us. For Kespa. He needs to make sure he wears a beanie. Or else his head's gonna freeze in Korea. Okay, nice. Blabber can grow. Nice. We can all be a team of mustaches on stage. That'll be so lit. We rock up the first 10 down in Brazil.
Hello,
All
hello,
5 of
hello.
us with mustaches.
Hello, I'm back. So sorry about
Yep.
that. Listen, whilst we're amongst friends, let's just admit. I mean, like, I went for a piss and it turned into a shit. I apologize. That's what took so long.
That's fine. We were talking shit about you in chat.
That's all good and all accepted. God, I've run out. This is how fat I am. I've run out of breath running from the bathroom to my PC. Like literally in the
How
next
far?
room. It's like literally in the next room. Like, but in any case, we talked about Aurelion Sol there, I think, right?
Yeah.
But she's always been a scaling kind of how would you describe her? Scaler, I suppose, but in terms of archetype of champion.
In the time, like pre-rework, like now he's a scaling champ. Before he was like he had a lot of pushing power with his W. Like because the 3 stars they just did so much damage to the minions, and you just push and roam. Like that's what him and Talia were. That's where their like core identities, at least in solo queue. They would just push and roam, push and roam, push and roam.
And that supposedly became quite intrinsic to your playstyle as well then.
Generally, yeah. Like when I started picking up other champs, that's how I would play them. Like I wasn't the best laner when I started picking up other champs, just because like my only philosophy of laning was like I'm gonna push this wave and then I'm gonna go roam bot lane.
Does that
And then of course when you play in competitive where like everyone's unintentionally feeding, you like start to fall behind.
to ask something that is purposely designed to insult you? Does that not speak to potentially a lack of intelligence in terms of your early days in league? If the game plan is specifically to just push the waves, it's kind of like an ignorance of some of the kind of wider fidelity of laning tricks, so to speak. Because a big thing that you have to like learn when you get really good at laning, isn't it? Is like, oh, when do I hold this? When did I push this? Like, oh, he touched that minion one extra time, so therefore he loses this lane now. How do you respond to those allegations?
I would actually say it's the opposite
Okay.
because I was able to hit rank 1 doing that.
Is that not
So
results-based analysis?
no, it is, but like not many people can get rank 1 like just in general. Like even my rank 1 push this year was fucking hard. It took a long time for me to do. So I think me being able to get rank 1 while
I don't mean necessarily
mastering that type of a
now
game.
that you have a lack of intelligence. It wasn't an insult in that way. I mean, more so mean back then when your mindset was just push waves, roam. It's sort of like does that not mean that potentially you weren't? What I'm saying is you didn't take to the game cerebrally as quick as others might do. Would that be fair to say?
No, that's what I was saying. I was disagree. Like I
Okay,
was able to hit rank 1 doing that playstyle.
okay,
So I had to, master it in some way or another.
that's fair enough. But in terms of when you really, I kind of want the reason I asked that question is to get more of a gauge of the kind of play that you were back then was because a lot of players, I mean, for example, player that's made a rank one grind recently, Natty, lots of people talk about kind of just how patient and consistent he is. That's kind of what people would describe him as a player. You see other players who hit rank one, sometimes in career, sometimes in other places. You describe them purely for their mechanics and stuff like that. APA is a rank one player back then. Like, what was the kind of the main thing about him? Were you mechanically strong? You were consistent? You didn't tilt? You had a good mental? What was it?
Um, well, I would tilt, but I was definitely mechanically strong on my champions. Like I considered myself at the time like the best Aesol, the best Talia, at least in solo queue. Um,
In the world or in A?
I would probably say back then in the world, but like now what I know now, probably just in an A. But uh, I was definitely very strong on mechanically in those characters specifically, and then I just understood their like every champ just has a win con for how you win the game, and how like they progress the game forward, and I just understood those win cons down to a T because I mean they coincided like the same, like pretty much the same win con because they're both very similar champions, but I was just elite at doing that in solo queue.
A question I wanted to ask you, and I feel like you're uniquely poised to answer this from your perspective, is that it often feels like pro players, especially, or even just players like, again, I go back to Natty. It's like if you play these two champions or three champions, if you spend the first few years of your career in a solo queue environment playing those champions, you're kind of always ahead on those champions, it feels. And it would probably be
Shit,
fair. Oh, God.
their motion censored.
In any case, listen, after what you're about to say, I do suspect that Team Liquid will be shutting down this interview at some point. So we'll just have to wait and see what kind of methods they employ. But like I was saying, people, when you have these two or three champions that you play and you play them religiously for years and you've got thousands of games logged onto them, and then you arrive at the point where it's like, oh, I need to play other champions, and then you play five other champions or so. You're always kind of ahead on those champions. Does it not feel in some capacity like really difficult to catch up? Because I'm not sure if you would still say it's the case, but your Nico, your Aurelion Sol, your Talia always seem to be not considerably better, but at least like one level above the rest of your champs.
No, I would say so that they are like. I mean, Ziggs is like the most
Ziggs as well, yeah,
like
that's
affluent champion that people consider me with, and then like I mean, it's no secret that I think my Ziggs is better than any of my other champions, and like if I'm in game 5, and of course it's fearless, so it's probably not gonna be there at game 5, but if it's like game 5, I have the Ziggs angle, I'm gonna like look to take him over anything else. But I think one thing that I like thinking about that is just like I've gotten other champions up to that tier as well. Like I don't think it's just Ziggs that's like I'm elite at, I'm S tier at, like however you want to put it. And I think I've gotten numerous other champions up to that like tier, I guess if you want to say it like that. And then I think I can continue to do so with other champions over time.
I suppose that's kind of the crux of my question if I was to kind of re-ask it to find out more about what I'm interested in is what I was kind of asking about was when you play those other champions, you've got so many more hours on them, how difficult is it to catch up? Because it must feel like, well, I don't have time to put in the 3,000 games that I did when I had nothing to do all day and I was playing solo queue for all those years. How difficult is it to catch up and bring them up into those tiers? Or is it easier because you've gotten better at the game?
well, I think it's easier because I've gotten better at the game, but also like I don't have that same time. Like
Yeah, fair.
what the fuck have I done the past 3 months? I've done nothing but watch Worlds and play League.
Well, I'd imagine that you don't have the exact same time that you did when you were religiously playing League, when like you were barely going to classes, or like before you went to school and it was online school and you're playing League all day. It can't be the exact same volume. You've got stage games, you've got scrims, you've got media
Yeah, but like look at the
obligations.
past 3 months. Like ever since I lost in playoffs, like the only thing I've done is like I've gone home to my brother's wedding. And like of course I can't spend or play League during that, but like my life the past few weeks has just been wake up, think about League, play League, like watch League, and go to sleep for the past like 2, 3 months. So like who's to say I don't at the same time?
That's fair enough. What would you say are champions that maybe, because you're right, there is a narrative that some of your champions are better than others, and you self-admittedly would say so. But you've also mentioned there that there are champions that you feel like you've brought into that tier. What would you say are champions that people maybe don't give you as much credit on that you think you're pretty decent at?
Um yeah, I'm pretty good at it there, to be completely honest with you. And like I don't think people think about Azir when they think of me, but I honestly think I'm pretty good at Azir. Like even when I play Azir in solo queue, I'm like I mean most of the time I'm running it down because I'm honestly running a lot of solo queue games down recently. But I like think to myself like if I didn't have 8 deaths, this would be a pretty good game.
How often are you thinking that in general? Like maybe in some competitive games this year, if you didn't have 8 deaths,
Well,
it'd be a good game.
I think in solo queue it's a lot easier to not have 8 deaths because those deaths are just like I'm going for a 1v2 outplay, and then I'm going for the next 1v2 outplay, and then I'm down 1,000 gold, so I'm gonna try and 1v1.
Hmm.
But then competitive, when I have 8 deaths, it's probably I'm just getting shit on.
Absolutely, obviously a bit of a troll question there. Any other champions that you feel like are in? Like, what would you say are kind of like your best champs?
Well, I think Ziggs, like
Yeah.
well, a lot of them are like champs you probably pop up at the top of your head. You know, Ziggs, Nico, Ace Talia. Even though I've only ever played one game of it and lost it, Kled. I think I'm pretty fucking good at Kled because Kled was another champ. I like one tricked. Um, like I listed Azir. These are just champs off the top of my head. I think I'm like, and then like those are honestly probably all the champs I would say I feel like I'm elite on. And then
What?
after that, it's like probably the step below,
Okay.
where like it's close but not the same, I guess.
And how do you? Because it is a thing when you're improving on champions, can you feel like can you feel yourself getting better on them? Is it like a thing with the champions that are in the tier below that? Is it like a thing where like maybe if you put 100 games on those, you can like suddenly be like, okay, cool, I can feel myself getting closer? Because I feel like with different people, when you hear them talk about League, it's like it just all clicks one day, and it's really hard to like measure progress. So how do you deal with like practicing champions in that sense?
Um, so the way I view champs is I think champs need two things. You need to be like mechanically proficient on a champ, which like just goes for every champ, and then you need to understand that champ's theory. And what I mean by that is like every champ in the game has a theory on how they want to play and how they win the game.
Hmm.
Like Ziggs, for example, like he's a strong laner, and then if you can enable him mid lane to move around the map, he can, drop ults on side waves or drop ults on like side lanes fighting. And then if you really can enable him to move or like he gets a move timer on his own, he can just go break turrets, and he's like one of the fastest turret breakers in the game because of his W. Like every champ has just a theory like that where that's how they want to progress the game forward. This is what they want to do. So I think in learning champs, it's like, of course, you need to play the actual champion to like get mechanically proficient and like read how you just want to play the fights. If I'm literally you just have to read how you want to play the fights versus like a large list of champions. Um, but I think you also just need to understand like the theory of how that champ wants to push the game forward, how they win games, literally just how they win.
I kind of wanted to quickly ask you because I feel like it's really interesting for me personally. I'm sure it's interesting for other people as well to hear you talk about it, how champions progress the game specifically. Because I think for some people that like maybe don't have as much knowledge, it can be difficult to see that sometimes. And I think you're someone that would be uniquely, again, you're in the unique position of probably being able to give one of the best answers on the planet Earth about this. Can you tell me a little bit about how ASOL progresses a game and what the theory behind ASOL is?
Um, well, right now it's just like a scaling champ, and then once he reaches his like items slash because his stacks now too. Like once he reaches like a considerable amount of stacks, like it's not really like a hard number, just like a decent amount of stacks. Literally is the best way to put it. And like two core, if you're in a good ASO game where it's like the enemy team is like low mobility, let's say they're Jhin, Syndra as their carries. Like if those carries lose flash for whatever reason, they super hard for them to function because of like the reach he has with his ultimate and his E. Like you just press ER on those immobile carries and they just get, they're 50% HP instantly with stunned. That's literally it. Like generally when I pick ASO nowadays, it's like when they're incredibly immobile and it's a game that doesn't seem like it's gonna end. It's not even just the lane itself. It's just like, does the game seem like it's gonna end in 10 minutes or 5 minutes or 15 minutes or whatever? If to me the answer to that question is no, or like it doesn't have to be, then if the game gets stalled out enough points, like I think he's one of those. I mean, that's like most scaling champions, but he's one of those champions where it's like if the game continues to go on, his win percentage will increase.
Absolutely. I wanted to ask you another thing, just while we're on the topic of champions. It's kind of I don't know whether you will give an answer or not. I think it would be a rare exercise in humility for a league player to be so candid about his weaknesses. But would you say there are champions that no matter how hard you try, they just don't necessarily work for you? They go very antithetical to your play style and what comes naturally to you? What are champions that you've tried to learn and you just can't make work?
Um, I mean, the biggest one is just Yone. Like, probably no secret. Like, I've tried every offseason, and I'm still trying again this offseason um, to make it work, but it just hasn't clicked. Like, some parts due to me, some parts, like, for example, like, I think bringing in champions on TL, like, not even just for myself, just as a team wide, it was pretty hard to introduce new champions if you didn't instantly perform on them. Yeah, it's hard to instantly perform on them, going from like NACL to, scrimming good teams. So, like, he's probably just one champ that hasn't clicked, but I think I can talk about it now because I'm working with Veigar V2. Um, I've been like doing a lot of like Yone reviews with him, and he's making the champ like click more in my head, and the games feel smoother and easier. So like, I don't know. My hope is that this year is the year that Yone is finally like an unlockable character for me.
Anivia, is that a champion you've been playing with him? Because that seems to me to be quite an APA champion in some ways.
Yeah, no, that's one champion. But I used to play a lot of Nivea in the past, anyways.
Okay. Interesting, and I suppose we have to go on to TL now because you've hinted at it there. You've teased us a little bit in terms of you said that it wasn't necessarily a receptive environment to bringing new things in, which at base sounds like maybe not the most welcoming creative environment, which is fine. Some art environments are, but what you hinted at there was essentially that it's not a good environment to bring in new champions because if you don't perform immediately, it would have had consequences in regards to bringing up that idea again. Would I be right in saying that that's an inference I could have made from what you said?
Generally, yeah.
Talk to me about that because that seems like it's quite a high pressurized environment in a way. The demand to perform immediately, and that almost speaks to a kind of a communicative style between members that demands perfection, so to speak. And if it's not there, doesn't necessarily beget understanding.
Um, well, I think the way you have to view our team, like I'm gonna include the team with Umpty first because he's like most of the team. Uh, it's Impact's a very like I'll just go down the line. Like Impact's a very like no bullshit guy. Like says things how they are, at least to him. Like I'll skip Umpty for now, but I'm like kind of the same way. Like I'm very passionate. I like believe in like very passionately whatever generally I'm doing at the time, and I have very high standards for myself and my teammates. I think Yon's the same way, Spawn's the same way, Core's the same way, but I think Core is just like a matured enough person to not let it be shown most of the time, just because he's like a 3 decade long veteran. Um, And then I think the only difference with Umpty was Umpty like really wasn't like that. He was always just about like trying to improve like whatever it is, and definitely like a softer touch, like a softer person on the team compared to like how
More sensitive, would that be
strict,
fair to say?
yep, more sensitive, like compared to how like strict and rigid a lot of the other teammates were, and like even Spawn was like Spawn's the same way I think, where he's like, you set a standard that you want to hold with him, and you know you come in and you don't hold that same standard, he's gonna be pissed at you. That's a very like, it wasn't like a fun team just in general. It was like a serious team is the way to put it.
But I think even in the even in a serious team, it's not necessarily the greatest if it's the case that you play a champion, you perform badly on it, and therefore trust is lost immediately. That doesn't necessarily come across as serious versus fun. That comes more as a lack of trust potentially. Was that a problem that was more manifesting more when problems arise, or is that kind of the feeling from day one?
Um, well, day one I don't think it was like that, just because your teammates and whatever. Like, I assume when I go into the new C9 team, not everyone's gonna show me their bad habits. The
Yeah.
first month or 2 months or whatever, and month three I'm gonna see like whoever's bad habits, like whatever they are. Um, but I would just say over time, and like I would really say as we got good, when those standards started to hold more. Because if you don't remember, and like people don't remember, the start of 2024 spring split, we were like just middle of the pack team, and we really spiked towards the end of playoffs. And I would say like after that spring split in 2024 is when we started holding high standards, and then we had like a decent MSI, decent EWC. Like we had a pretty good summer, except we lost to minions. And then coming into this year, like we just had high standards from the previous year, where like we were this good then. We all know that we can be better. If we just do a little bit more, we'll be better. But I think it was the, like I guess that strictness or that tension, if how you want to put it, as to what started to, in my opinion, inevitably break it all down. Just because like everyone's so tight with how they view things, and like just over time you can only have like a strict line for that long until it starts to snap.
So I guess the follow-up question to that would be from me. Do you think there was more potential, there needed to be more room for slightly like softness at times, just to create a duality, a contrast, a comparison?
I I mean, for sure, but I just think as like people, like it just wasn't capable. Like it's hard to tell a person like impact. I mean, like we would have, we probably had numerous ones. I don't know how many off the top of my head, where it was like everything out of the bag conversation, where everyone would sit in the room that's literally right there. It's just like a room with couches and a TV, and we would just sit all around in a circle and we would talk with each other and be like, "This is problems I think we have with the team," and it was like a no holds back conversation. But a lot of the conclusions of the conversation was, yeah, I probably agree with what you're saying, but it's hard for me to do that as a person. And like you can respect someone for answering that way, but it's like, fuck, man, that's pretty tough for the team then.
Does that not come back to a certain capacity when you talk about you almost have to, I feel like sometimes to truly achieve greatness, you have to like go beyond what should be capable of you as a person or go outside of what you are as a person. But it sounds like you're also holding yourself culpable for that. Were you at times maybe restricted by who you were as a person?
Sure. Like there's there's no way I want to paint it where like it's everyone else's fault but mine on the team, because I was definitely at some points throughout the year like a bad teammate. Like I was probably tilting too much in scrims during certain games, or like bad attitude to feedback. And yeah, like I'm definitely as much as a culprit or a criminal, however you want to put it, as like everyone else on the team is.
That's fair. But I guess to go back to the question, it's a case of you talk about I can't do this as a person. I kind of wanted to ask what it is about you as a person that restricted you this year in terms of some of the things that might need to be done. When you talk about this feedback of oh, I can't do this because I hear what you're saying and I agree with you, but I can't do this because of the person I am. What kind of person are you?
Um, Trying to think. The best example I can give is like with how bad our scrims ended up getting. I would often just get tilted and annoyed, and I'm sure if you were to ask Spawn or whoever, like he would also probably agree with what I'm saying. Like I would just get tilted quite often during scrims because of like there's generally scrims felt like a waste of time towards the end of the year, to put it bluntly, and I would just get annoyed at that. And like sometimes they would bring it up, but I think with everything else going around, it was just like a never-ending cycle of just like it was. I think I typed it to you as well. It's like someone plays bad, someone gets tilted. That person who's tilted now plays bad because they're tilted. Then the next person gets tilted, and then that's how the day went.
But I suppose the question then would be from the onlookers. It seemed to be such an environment in which um you would assume there would be kind of measures in place to kind of have that reset to prevent this kind of what you're talking about as being like a monopoly that kind of informs itself. It's a monopoly that goes monopolies falling over and knocking each other over in kind of a circular repetitive structure. Why was there no thing to kind of stop this or bring it back to reset? Why is so much of what you're talking about inevitable and unstoppable?
Well, there was. They just didn't work. Like I said, we had countless conversations as a team where it was just like there's a no hold back conversation where like this is what I'm upset about, and this is what Jan's upset about, this is what Impact's upset about, etc., etc. And we'd all talk about it and like be like, this is what we need to do to improve this. This is what we need to do to improve as a team or like personal improvement or like whatever it is. And then like everything would be fine for a week, but then it's hard to throw away all that baggage. Like after playing with the team for 2 years, and like for John and Core as well, including me, it's like 2.5 years, and for them 3 years together. It's hard to throw away all the baggage of literally just that.
What were the main issues that people took with your strictly because I mean you've made it clear it's like you tilted in scrims and whatever and you're contributing to that, so that's obviously something that people were taking issue with. But in terms of pure gameplay, what were people taking issue with you? Like what's a kind of a you
Shit.
don't worry about the lights, bro, it's all good.
Go on.
What were the things that people were taking issue with you? Like what's a main kind of criticism of feedback you were getting both from officials and scrims? Like, what did they take issue with?
It was just everything. Like we were a hypercritical team. Like it's hard to pinpoint one thing because like any perceived mistake would be talked about. Like not even just about myself, like everyone, including the team. Um, so like I think towards the end, a lot of it was like side laning stuff because we were having like really bad side laning macro. But like to be honest, the answer was literally everything. Like everyone criticized everything for like any little bit that they could see, even if it was like a small bit. Like that's part of why honestly our reviews were kind of bad. Was someone would see someone like fuck up and they'd talk about that for 5 minutes rather than like a macro sequence that's like actually relevant to the game.
Well, that's quite an indictment. So at one point it just became rather about personal criticism rather than focusing on the big picture, and that actually impeded your progress massively.
Impeded the team's progress, not just mine.
Of course,
And like
I meant
like I said, this is
yours in the team.
yeah, and like I said, this is also including myself too. Like I'm no way absolved of this
No, of
crime.
course. I think you've made that abundantly clear so far that you're no innocent in this trial of TL, so to speak. But when it was going well, to kind of revert back to the positives for a moment, when it was going well, there was a time where it felt like, from a lot of analysts that I respect, that you guys were regarded amongst like some of the better teams in the world because at least for like the lane swap meta, you kind of you seem to have like that period of time like very, very figured out, and I think that's like kind of would it be fair to say that's what led to your kind of emergence as being a team that could go internationally and take games off of some of the best teams in the world?
I think so. I think like, I mean, I'm confident in saying that we were the best lane swap team in the world at the time. It, it took us a while to learn it and took us a while to structure our concepts within lane swapping, but I think towards like the end of like MSI and going into the summer split, we were leagues above every other team. And I'm sure if you ask other teams at that time, they were saying like they would just copy us. Like FlyQuest at the time would literally said they had like the Team Liquid lane swap.
That's interesting. I suppose the question would be then is if you were so you think you were miles ahead of everyone else at MSI with swaps
With swaps, yeah.
and
Like
swap
other gameplay, maybe not so much.
sure, but swaps seem to be the kind of the main method of generating leads at that time. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah.
So then the question would beg, where did you fall short in other departments? Because if you're so good at the part of the game which is generating leads, typically speaking, logic dictates that's the part of the game where Western teams fall behind, is the laning phase. And if you can figure out a way where you can generate leads against Eastern teams, why were you guys not able to convert? What was the main difficulty beyond that?
Um, well, I think our problem as a team during that tournament wasn't that we weren't clutch, because I think we did have a lot of clutch moments. It was just that we weren't elite at team fighting, like some of the Eastern teams. Like when we faced T1 at that MSI, if you go back and watch that series, I confidently believe if we were a better team fighting team, we would have won that series. Like I think it was game 2 we threw because like largely because we got ahead and then we literally just got out teamed by T1. Like I remember, I don't know if it's that specific game, but Vayne just completely gliding on us. He kept playing Vayne versus Impact's Cassante top, and he was completely gliding on us that entire series. Um, and then I think that's literally just like a large part of it. Like I confidently believe we would have beat them if we were just better team fighters, because I think we had them beat in a lot of other scenarios. They were just, like that team is they're like probably the best team of all time in like recent years.
How do you get better at team fighting? It sounds like a stupid question, but I mean, with laning, it seems like it'd be a lot more straightforward. You practice 1v1s, you can play solo queue. Team fighting seems like such a strange thing to. I know from like having like running teams, even though it's a considerably lower level. Often it feels like certain teams are just better at team fighting just because it's how they click on day one and how certain people work together. So like, how were you trying to improve at team fighting? And talk to me about kind of the uphill battle of what it sounds like.
Um, so this was a lot of Rainover's job within the team as our strategic coach. He just introduced numerous concepts of how he wants us, how he views other teams play team fights out. Like the best teams in the world, like T1 for example, like a lot of LSK teams, and just how he wants us to like recognize those signs of this is when to do this.
Triggers.
And we would just have multiple presentations, like multiple presentations about just specific concepts, and then we just try and practice those concepts as much as we could in like our practice.
And how easy was that for you to soak up? Because I suppose it's not easy to kind of talk about, you never want to talk about interest specifics of like why you were bad at team fighting, but do you feel like there was something you struggled with? Like what part did you play in the not being a good team fighting team?
Well, before we go on with the question, I actually want to correct it a little bit. I don't think we were a bad team fighting team. I just don't think we were an elite team
Okay,
fighting team.
sure, bad, but in comparatively to what your aspirations were.
Yeah, I think to the elite player, to not the elite teams, we were not in comparison, but like to NA levels, I think we were solid, good, whatever you want to put it.
Sure. But then go on. But what was stopping you potentially from contributing to elite level team fighting? Like what were your limitations throughout the year?
Well, this year there was a lot more than
Sure, that year I
team
mean.
fighting, but
Yeah.
but last year I think it was a lot of it to me was honestly just like we understood these concepts and we try to replicate these concepts, but it's hard to actually practice the concepts when you don't often get there in a scrim game. And like even when you do get there in a scrim game, I'm facing Tomo Isles and Kaney, and not Faker Gumiyushi Carrier in a
What
team fight.
what are you trying to say about Tomo and Isles and Kine?
That they're nowhere near comparison to the other 3 players I listed.
It's fair enough. It's probably true. Don't think anyone's going to get you in too much trouble for that.
I think it's a pretty humble statement to say Tomo's a little bit worse, a lot bit worse than Gumiyushi.
Yeah, fair. But I suppose that's an excuse that not an excuse, but it's a thing that a lot of people say is like, well, the competition domestically is not enough to like get good practice from. I mean, famously, G2 talks a lot about that, like not being pushed enough in their own region. But when you go to international scrims, talk to me about international scrims because I presume that's where. Would it be fair to say that's where you make most of your improvement during a year?
That's where you make most, or that's when it really feels like you have to catch up. Is just the best way to put it. Because every team that wins their league, of course, is just good at some specific game plan or game style or whatever. But then when you go into like the really good teams, they're not just good at that. They're good at like like for example Genji. Like even though they haven't won worlds, they're generally when you look at Genji, they're an extremely well-rounded team when it comes to everything. They're good at attacking, they're good at defending, they're good at objectives, they're good at objective setups, they're good at engaging, they're good at disengaging. They're like literally they're just good at everything. They're a very, very well-rounded team. But then, like you look at Team Liquid is like, yeah, we were good at lane swaps.
I suppose when you put
So
when you put it like that, it is very very difficult.
so it's just like a lot of catch up, and then you have to actually conform to how they play the game because they put so much pressure on you throughout the game that even though you're elite at this one thing, they're elite at 10 other things. So you have to like catch up and then hold your own, and then because I'm losing lane to Chovy, I no longer have those roam timers that I would have in an A because I'm no longer laning against Gainy. I'm laning against Chovy now. So I have to actually like sweat in lane
Let's think of
just to even
another
get some CS.
NA mid as well. Just share out the flame a little bit. I feel bad for the Koenig guy. But in any case, the question I had as a follow up to that is, it's a topic that comes up in terms of this conformity when you have to go and play these scripts. How do you react as a competitor? Because you're someone that, at the top of the show, in a thematic presence for the interviews, you hate fucking losing. That's the quote. You hate fucking losing. But it's, you go and you play these international scrims, and it must feel even more frustrating for you as the person you are, who's emotional in that way. How are you reacting at the daunting task of being like, oh my god, these guys are so fucking good. What do we do?
It's frustrating for sure. Like it's a frustration build up. At the start it's like, fuck, these guys are good. They humble you a little bit, but then towards the end it's like, fuck, we can't win. Like if I don't know how much you watch the Team Liquid content, but there's a clip of me punching my desk at the MSI boot camp when we were in China. I don't even remember who we were scrimming, but I just remember I was completely pissed off and like something bad happened, and I like, just slammed my desk. So it's like it is a frustration build up, but I think because I was like, I'm in my second international, um, but like just over the internationals, I've literally learned to like that's how it is, and then even though I didn't make an international coming to MSI when MSI was in America this year, um, I'm blanking. Like you can just take those learnings from literally just facing harder opponents and getting shit on easier now that I just have that experience under my belt.
What's the best lane you ever played in your life in scrims that like you took away as like a personal victory? Like, have you ever had a game in scrims where it's like you've gone really well against
Um,
Chovy or Faker, and it's like, oh wow, like I'm here and I'm proud, you know?
I played off the top of my head. I played a really good Tristana game into Faker last year at MSI, and it was like a 15-minute game. I had like 20 some kills or so, and we ended up winning the game.
Well, I'd fucking hope
And
so with 20 kills, mate.
but it was like I think I played incredibly well that game, and it was probably like I was incredibly proud of that one random scrim game.
And then equally, what's the hardest you've been shit on by like an elite level team in scrims?
Um, I think playing against Chovy's way. Chovy's way just completely fisted me in lane. I forget what I was playing, to be honest. But I remember him fisting me every time Umpty tried to gank him. He just 1v2'd us. And like even coming into the mid game, like he'd be like, I remember a specific moment. His entire team's bot side, and he's top lane, and I'm 1v1ing him, and Umpty comes up to try and gank him, and he just 1v2s us. And just completely fists us. I was like, holy fuck, this guy is so good at the game.
How do you react in that moment with Umties? You just look at each other and just kind of laugh. Like, there's not really much you can do at that point. Like,
Um, I think there was frustration of how hard we were getting shit on at the time, but like afterwards, we definitely laughed about it.
yeah. Is he? Because he's a player I feel like is so kind of you always just feel like it's inevitable he'll win a Worlds and an MSI. And I mean, he actually for the first time at this Worlds kind of opened up about anxiety that he faces during the game. But I suppose I'm asking this question comes from a personal kind of bias because I love his story so much and I want to see him win. But to kind of dispel the narrative, could you talk to us about how strong he is as a player when you played against him in scrims? Like, what is the feeling like? Because so many people talk about how just individually he is the best player in the world. Would that be fair to say?
Um, yeah, no, I think the best way to put it is in MSI when he was this year, how we saw everyone go like the what's the item called? It's the 1300 gold mage item that builds into Leandri's. Um, the mask.
Yeah.
I forget what it's called, but that mask item that's 1300 gold, and he stacked them. He built like 3, 4 of them. The whole reason that meta was there at MSI was because of him, because he would go into every scrim against like whoever he faced and just completely fist everyone with that. Like he literally just defined that MSI meta, that mid lane meta, because he was so good at that. He like no matter what champion he played. I mean, specifically a lot of it was on Aurora, if I recall, but like of course it's fearless, so had to be on a lot of champions. He just went that build and he would just stomp everyone. So everyone just conformed to what he was doing because like he was just that much better at the time.
And I suppose the anecdote I've always had, because it's one of these things where it's like, for me, what I love so much about this about esports is the storytelling aspect of it and hearing stories. Like I'm a sucker, despite being someone who's a bit more behind the scenes nowadays. I'm a sucker for hearing Faker say "all roads lead to me" or something like that, and I love a story. Like in the same way that when you hear like an NBA tale, like the Fever Game by Michael Jordan, like I love a story like that. But so one of my favorite anecdotes I've ever heard was when I was in Korea. I spoke to someone who used to play LCK Academy, and he talked about when he played against Chovy way back in the day, as Chovy was having his come up. Like I think maybe it was just before he went and joined LCK, the first thing with Griffin, I think, just before he joined Griffin. And he talked about how the first time he began against Chovy, it was like a thing of like, and I wonder if resonates with you playing against some of these players. It's a thing where they're better than you, and then that makes you realize you have to make decisions faster than you're capable of because they're just a bit faster than you. They come to the click a bit quicker. They push for the minion. They go aggressively, just slightly quicker, and then it makes you make that kind of unforced error, almost like playing in tennis against a player who's faster than you and better than you. It's like eventually, not immediately, but over the course of 15 serves back and forth, you're going to make an unforced error because they're that much quicker than you. Is that how mid lane against some of these elite players feel, or is that too much of a romanticized version?
A little bit of a romanticized version of it, but it's like has I guess some truth to it because like all the elite players, I mean, like you've seen this same like elite 5 mid laners from Korea come to ever international. Um, I think they generally always just have like so much pressure behind their game plan, which is like something that I've been trying to emulate a lot, especially like this off season from watching a lot of them at Worlds. Is like it's hard to notice that pressure as a viewer,
Yeah.
but then when you
Well,
play
this is.
against
Sorry
it,
to cut you off. This is what I'm getting at because it's like so many people you hear them speak about it. They speak about it in terms of the intangible. It's almost like in the first like minute or so of the lane, it just feels different. How are you able to? Have you? I suppose what you're talking about in the off season, you've been trying to work out what that feeling is in some ways. Have you gotten anywhere close to it?
well, like sure in solo queue I have, but solo queue, still against Bob the Builder 33. is a lot different than like whoever I'm gonna
No, of course.
face in
Don't be
LCS.
don't be facetious. Come on. When I'm talking to you about when you played against Chovy and you're studying these VODs from Worlds at the Korean elite mid laners. You're right. They exhibit this pressure that can sometimes feel intangible. People speak about that, and in watching them, I presume in some ways you're trying to work out what that actually is. Trying to bring something that they're bringing that maybe is not easily understandable and people can't understand into your gameplay. So I guess my question would be, how close are you to working out what that is, and can you tell us what that is in some ways?
Mm, well, I'd say like within like maybe not past couple splits, I haven't been able to showcase it, but like before, I think I was showcasing a lot of it, especially last year when I honestly considered myself the best mid. Um, like the only way to like talk about it is like it's gonna be more intangible stuff. So I don't know if you want to hear it because it
If
kind of
that
sounds like bullshit.
if that's the only way you can talk about it, that's all you can do. And I like intangibles. Let's talk about it.
It's like they'll play on knife's edge, but they always have like the upper hand. Best way to put it. Like even when they, make a mistake, step a little bit too close so you can land a skill shot, they dodge the skill shot. But you play against, I'll literally say like a normal player because these players are just these guys are elite. You play against a normal player who
Would you
makes like
call
the
them would
same.
you call them abnormal? Would you equate that kind of supernatural feeling?
I don't know if I would go that far. I think like
Is that reserved for only a few players?
I don't even know if it's reserved for any players.
Okay.
Um, I think when a normal player makes a small mistake, like stepping literally like 50 units too close and gonna get hit by like a Cinder Q or whatever. Like when you play against Chovy or Faker, or Zeka, or Showmaker, like all those guys, like they make that same mistake, but then they'll dodge that Cinder. So it's like, well, now they're in your range, but you have no skills now. So even though they made the mistake, they come out on the upper side.
I suppose it is almost like that thing of like, you've got two snipers in a trench, one pops their head up, but if you miss, it doesn't matter if you presented that disadvantage. It doesn't matter if you don't capitalize on it. And they're seemingly, even when they present disadvantages, are able to kind of wiggle their way out of it.
Yeah, that's just the best way to put it. And then like those m- mistakes or mess ups or disadvantages don't come often because they're so well rounded how they play the game.
Well, I suppose at that point, it's like, when what do you evaluate that to? I suppose it's just more. Is it as simple as saying that that's just an effect of them being more mechanically skilled?
I think it's the phrase like iron sharpens iron. There's not that much of like elite laning in other regions. And even when there is, it's like only coming from a couple players who don't like scrim that often, don't play against each other that often. So I think it's just that phrase like iron sharpens iron.
Who are the best laners in NA over the last 2 years?
I think like Jojo when he was here was a good laner. Quid's a good laner. Um, Quad plays a slower lane, but he's a good laner. Those are people that come immediately off the top of my head.
That's fair. And then in that case, I suppose it's a thing where, well, what I don't know. It's a difficult thing to answer because it's like, it's so much of the conversation when you arrive at this point where it's like, well, iron sharpens iron. What do you do? Like, I suppose you're going to career soon, so that's part of the solution, is to go and get some laning practice out there. But how do you stay motivated in that sense? Because it's like you must, at a certain point, when you view that intangible, you become obsessed with the intangible, but the intangible must feel like it's harder to reach throughout the year. How do you contend with that?
Well, I think it's also like winning any region, even if it's NA or like EU or whatever it is, it's still fucking hard. Like I still think like even though they didn't have the best showing this Worlds, like I think FlyQuest was still a pretty fucking good team this year. So there is like those semblances of iron. Like there still is iron in every region. G2 or Europe has G2 for example. We had FlyQuest this year. Like I think Team Liquid last year was an iron team, if you want to consider it like that. Um, like every region still has their top teams, and like you still have to beat them. Like I don't think me joining C9 is going to be like, oh, there's no other teams that are good. I'm just going to win the league. You still have to try hard. You still have to study your other opponents. I'll have to study like Zinni and Quid again, and I'm blanking on who the other top teams are. But like Quad, because I think Flacos will probably be another good team. Like, still have to, to make it internationals, you still have to beat everyone else. And
No,
if
of
you can't
course.
beat everyone else, then who cares?
How much of that plays a part in your role this year? The fact that you kind of was there a point in which you were like looking towards the internationals and it kind of the domestic got away from you? Because I feel like once you see that quite often with people, they get a taste for the international and then they think that the home situation is taken care of, and then you come back home and potentially you're not the same domestically dominant team you were before. Is that a fair evaluation?
Um, I think I would say at the start of this year, our goal is to make like every international. But I think towards summer split, our goal is just to win a game. So,
Fucking hell. Jesus.
like, or not just to win a game, but like just to win the next series is the way to put it.
Yeah, okay.
But so I think our expectations were extremely high at the start of the year, but then towards the end of the year, grew less and less as we just became like a more bad team.
Bit of an unfair question, but do you think that TL kind of in some ways got lucky to make it to first down this year? Because it definitely didn't look like you were going to do it at some points, and I think people were somewhat surprised to see you make it there.
I don't think we were lucky. I think we were best team in that tournament. I think if we faced C9 Hotheads, of course, but if we faced Blackwest, I think we would have beat them as well. It's hard to, for me, it's hard to say we got lucky when Blackwest lost to the team that we 3-0'd.
That's fair.
Like,
I guess what I'm also saying is I don't think people would have predicted TL from some of the performances that we saw. It felt like you got a bit better during the playoffs, for example. I don't think everyone would have. I don't think lots of people would have predicted you guys would be the team that would make it to first stand.
yeah, but I think that's when our team was still functioning well, to be completely honest. And we were still like smashing everyone on scrims. Like we were still 8% some win rate in scrims. We were still very good NA team at the time.
And what
So like
happened at?
even if
Sorry, go on.
yeah, you can go on. That's it.
And what happened at this tournament? Because I just to give kind of a Hunter S. Thompson kind of recite POV from what I was witnessing, because I was obviously seeing all of you every day, and I was there at the tournament, watching it from a bystander, more as like an onlooking novelist. But I noticed a lot of stress, a lot of
And singer, you were singing to me.
yeah, I sang to you in an interview, good vocals on myself. Um, but
Care to sing again?
Mama, sorry, just hit a high note there. Not prepared, but just to show you I can do it whenever I need to. But a lot of stress I noticed from the team, just in interacting with all of you. Kind of spoke to Core JJ at the time a little bit. I think I interviewed you once or twice as well. I think you maybe even three times, and just kind of the whole vibe seemed to be very, very stressed, even before many games had happened. So talk to me about that. Give me kind of a behind the scenes in look there, look in rather.
Um, well, I think going into the tournament we didn't prepare well. Like we, of course, came from Brazil, but then some people went to Korea instantly. Well, like I went back here to LA. John went here to LA. I can't remember where everyone else went. Um, so like we couldn't even scrim going into the tournament, and then we only arrived like a couple days beforehand, less than a week beforehand. Um, so we weren't really scrimming, even though it was on a different patch. Of course, we were like talking about the game, what we think's changed, but we weren't actually playing the game as a team. So I think we came into the tournament like pretty just underdeveloped for any international compared to like the previous ones that we've gone to where we boot camped for like a month beforehand. And then I don't know. I think we all expected us to be able to beat EU, and then we just didn't respect CFO as a team. Literally, that was just it. I think like when we beat EU, like we were, the sales were high, the vibes were good, everyone was having a good time, and then we faced CFO the next day, and we thought like that. Like I respect CFO a lot now, By the time I was just like,
I
oh,
don't
this
think
is a
any. I
minor
don't
team
think any.
game.
I don't think anyone knew at the time, right?
Yeah, like I just thought they were just gonna be like worse than the EU team, and then we faced them and they completely fisted us, and we were like, it was like a little bit of shell shock. They just completely stomped us. They fisted us, then we go up to top esports and they fisted us. So it's like, you go from this high from beating KC, and you think you're gonna like, I mean, of course it's only 5 teams, but you think you're gonna make the playoffs of the tournament, and maybe you can get a lucky draw and make finals. Going to, oh shit, the only way we can make playoffs now is beating HLE.
And talk to me about the differences between playing Vladdy and Honku. Like, first, talk to me about what it was like playing against Vladdy, and then I can only presume by the fact that you felt that CFO was a better team, that you felt that Honku was a step up. But start with Vladdy for me.
Um, one game Vladdy fisted me, like it's a 0 game, but I honestly think I just completely griefed. I remember it. I died for like 2 caster minions, and then it like completely ended my lane, and a
What
lot
is
of other people were
your
losing.
what is your adoration for this word fisting? Where have you gotten this from? Is this a category that you enjoy, or
It's just a common word people use, I guess,
not?
that I picked
Maybe
up upon.
maybe a common word that people use, but not to this extent. It seems to be coming to your mind a lot. So
Thanks for the questions.
Vladdy was dominating you on Azir. Talk to me. Carry on.
But I think like the other 2 games, he just felt like a very passive player. If the leads weren't given to him, that's just how it was. Like other than Caps, I've never been that respectful to the EU mids because I've always thought they were kind of bad.
Apart from
Um,
caps.
other than Caps,
Yeah.
I think Caps is good. But everyone else, like Human over my faced him was bad. I wasn't really impressed with Vladdy, even though he had like one good game against me. Because in the other 2 games, it just felt like he was AFK, waiting for his team to win him the game. They weren't, because they're also losing. And then comparing like that to Hongq, like I could instantly feel the pressure from Hongq the instant I stepped in lane. I remember I played Talia versus Azir, and the way I played that lane was like I'd shove 3 waves, base, grab tier, and then 2 back in lane and start to like dominate, start to dominate
Yeah.
the enemy opponent.
He's your new coach as well, so it's good to get a mention of him.
Um, and he stepped up when I had tier, and like the way I viewed the lane at the time was if you step up and take that like handshake duel, if you get hit by the Talia W, it's hard. Like you just lose it, like, potentially die. But he stepped up and he did the thing where like I was talking about how the elite players do. He
Yeah.
made the mistake, but then he dodged my Talia W, and he won the trade. I think he even burned my flash if I recall correctly. And it went from the moment where in my head I thought I was going to solo kill him, and I thought he made a huge mistake and like literally threw his entire game, to him burning my flash. And it was like it didn't shock me at the time because I was like still in game, still trying to win. But like after the game, I was like, holy shit, this guy's like fucking good.
He's young as well, to be fair. I mean, I don't know if you put any credence into that, but I think he was 17 at the tournament, right? Does that make it even more impressive to you that he can be that kind of like a raw rookie and then still kind of exhibiting some of those skill sets?
Yeah, I mean for sure, like literally just prodigy level of a player. Like I mean, everyone saw it towards the end of this year, like going into MSI and Worlds, where he had like a good series against 2-1. I think they beat 2-1 as well at this Worlds, if I recall correctly. They had, like like, pretty formidable showing, and I think I don't know. I have a lot of respect for Honku after this year, like especially after the first 10 tournament,
You'd call him a prodigy.
for sure.
And what does prodigy equate to? Because when you look at his talent and you can maybe compare it to, I suppose it's difficult because if you're speaking to a player that's played for 10 years, I could ask you, oh, how does he stack up to 17-year-old Faker? But you can't do that. But I suppose if you were to look at his trajectory potentially and where he could go, how good just how good do you think he could be?
I don't know how to answer that, but I think the way I view it, calling him a prodigy, is just the little amount of experience he has. Because like for this year, he really didn't play tier 1 professional, like maybe a little bit,
Hmm.
if I recall. but with the little experience he had, he's already doing so much. You know, coming from a region that doesn't normally do well, I think he was pushing his region up. So like, I think that's a very fair assumption to make, that to call him a prodigy with like the little experience he has with how well he's doing.
If you were to do kind of a world mid-ranking list, whereabouts do you think he makes it? Does he crack top 5 quite, or is he probably in that 6 to 8 range?
I would say he's top 10. Like Hongkyu's probably top 10, but with a lot of room to improve, just because I think a lot of stuff that he doesn't have is literally just experience that a tremendous amount of the other mids have. Like even players like Chovy, they've been around for like 5 years at this point.
And at your peak, because I won't ask you for your answer now because it's probably top 100, but at your peak, where would you rank yourselves in terms of the mids in the world?
Mm, I think. Honestly, I think that, like when it really was my meta, like a MSI or like the ADC meta, even though it wasn't really ADC meta at Worlds, I thought I was fucking good. Like when I compared myself to other players, like I don't know, because it's kind of hard to put like a top 10 when you're not playing against them. Because I'm talking more like regular season. But I'd compare myself to the elite mids in Korea during like the ADC mid meta, and I thought I was like not miles ahead of them, because I won't be like that cocky, but I thought I was like doing better than them at certain things that like they were known to be good at.
Which puts you at what?
Like I don't know how to put it into like a like a tier list or however you want to put it, because
Yeah.
there's no international play.
Okay. Well, to be fair, you did give us a cocky statement there, so I won't push for the definitive Hangman's News that is saying that you're a top 3 mid laner in the world at the time, even though it kind of sounds like that's what you're saying.
I wouldn't go that far as top.
Okay, cool. We'll infer from that what you mean, and I won't push you any further on it. But we talked about Honky though. We talked about Laddie a little bit. I think that probably pretty much sums up firsthand, unless you have any other thoughts on it. I mean, we've kind of gotten a little bit of an idea of why it was such a disaster for you, but at whatever capacity you want to go further and talk to us about what made this tournament difficult, because it was a bit of a shocking outing for NA, some would say.
Um, well, I think the only other thing that really upset me about first stand was like the HLE match, because it's kind of a little bit thrown under their bus, but like I think Spawn was our best drafter, of course the head coach, but then he ended up leaving to go home for like personal reasons that I won't disclose. And like I think Swiffer didn't really give us the most solid drafts. I think like he'll say that himself as well. So I think like in the do or die series that beating HLE was, it really sucked to lose our best coach drafter.
I presume it probably made an insurmountable challenge feel like even more difficult.
Yeah, I wouldn't say insurmountable, because I think we thought we could beat them,
Yeah.
but it's just like we're just making it more difficult than what it should be.
I've kind of realized
And like
as a psychological trick in this interview, if I just use kind of an amplifying modifier in terms of my words, I can really get you to bite on it. Like insurmountable there, like a few times before. I was doing it accidentally before, but I'm thinking of doing it more consciously just to kind of, pull out some answers from you. You really give me a lot to work with here. It's great.
I'll keep that in mind.
Being kind by letting you into the process. Sorry, I cut you off a little bit there. I don't know what you wanted to say, if it was anything more about first stand.
I don't recall. Probably not.
In any case, you come out of first stand, you go home, and you're practicing for the next split. The rest of the year is similarly difficult, in many ways, actually, strangely, despite how bad that tournament might have been for you. It's probably the peak of the year. It was quite a rough year at times for TL. Would that be fair to say?
Oh, for sure. I was like my worst year with the org.
And was that the beginning of the? Talk to me about in terms of these problems that you kind of have as a legacy across this year. Is first stand the inception point? Is this when the cracks really start to show, or was it happening before then?
See, I think first stand was a fluke in my opinion, and it was just like
A complete what,
one
sorry?
bad thing. a fluke.
Okay.
And it was just like one bad thing. And it was just like, I literally just thought of it as like one bad thing. I think really when cracks started to show, because I think that's when everyone was performing quite well,
Hmm.
is like Umpty just had some personal, like family health problems that was happening over in Korea, and of course he's in America. And then given how like I described our environment was like the same way last year as I was describing it this year, except the only difference was we're winning, so it's like more lax. So I think Umpty personally just started having like just a lot of inconsistencies in his game plan. And I like, I've never asked him, but I would like say probably a lot of it was due to just, he's thinking about home, thinking about like his family that he probably wants to spend time with, and then you know he's here playing the Eain getting criticized for coming mid and missing a Jarvan EQ. Um, so he wasn't having the best time, and then he's like starts to underperform, and then I think that was like an endless cycle for him, where like performance bad, gets criticized, feels worse because he's getting criticized, but then he also probably thinks about home, and it like reached a point where it was like the straw that broke the camel's back within like his own game plan, where I think he really just started falling off a cliff. And like I don't like personally, I don't blame him. Like I don't really share what happened, but he like, had like family medical emergencies that he couldn't really tend to. So like I feel bad for him. Um, and I think like that was personally to me the catalyst that really started everything off.
I suppose it's a difficult question to ask, and whatever help you need, potentially making it less difficult, we can have a conversation about it. And equally, if it's not something you want to talk about, we don't have to talk about it. But the question that really kind of jumps out at me from that is you have this environment whereby the standards have to be upheld, of course, and that's one side of the argument. But then also, so often you talk about as being a part of being a teammate is dragging the last man across the line and only being as strong as your weakest link. It strikes me as potentially counterintuitive if someone is struggling with something outside of game to still keep up with the same rigorous strictness, potentially also if you can witness the fact that it's having a negative cycle or whatever. Where did that lack of awareness to that how did that lack of awareness happen? Like, why was there not a point where it was kind of a conversation of this isn't really beneficial and it's making him play worse, or was it the case that you weren't really realizing that at the time?
um, I think for the I think Umti kept it to himself, and then he went to the management like a little bit later on, but he kept it from the players. So like to me at
Okay,
the time,
that's valuable context.
I would like criticize him for his play because like of course I didn't know like anything
Okay,
was going on. I just thought he was playing shit. Why are you playing shit? But then given the context that I know now, and then when I learned that context, I like gave him a lot more grace. But it was like it's still at the end of the day, you're playing on a competitive team that's here to win.
would it be fair to say that in the time between knowing and not knowing, it was like the damage had already been done in terms of like feeding that cycle?
Um, I think it was just the damage from like a year and a half before, rather than like the damage in that I don't know how many weeks it was before it was happening because I never asked him like definitive dates or anything.
Sure. I'm also mean in terms of like you talked about with Umti, the problem being that it just became like a vicious cycle of criticized, confidence decreases, skill decreases, criticized, XYZ. And I wondered if, in terms of, because obviously there's a period of time where you don't really know what's going on, and then you are aware, and it's like you're extending grace and you're trying to be kinder in that sense. But when you arrive at that point, did it feel difficult because it almost felt like it was too late?
I guess yeah, but I don't think it was just because let's say it was 3 weeks. I don't think it was just because that 3 week period.
Sure.
I think it was just because
What you're saying is a
everything
lot to do with
within the
build up as
past
well.
like
Yeah.
year and a half.
And for that, I suppose, is one of those things where I kind of want to talk about kind of the multifaceted nature of what it would have been at the time, because it can't just have been that Umt's drop in skill was a contributing factor. Like, what other ways was that manifesting in the team in a drop of skill? Obviously, presumably that was like well, to put it metaphorically, a nexus at the core of it, but it's obviously branching off into other things as well. What were other reasons
Mm,
that TL declined at that
yeah.
point?
I think a lot of it literally was just due to how we treated the environment, like how I discussed earlier. Like everyone except Umpty was a very like harsh critic upon themselves and upon the team. And then you really only lost like, we lost like the soft touch, the soft side that you had on the team. And like of course we replaced her with Yuuji, who was like a nice guy, but he these lights. Fuck, I can't be bothered.
It's all good.
Um it's like there was already a lot of trust break from the team because Umpty started to underperform, others started to underperform. Like I'm sure people will say like me or Impact started to underperform, and then it was like that's really, in my opinion, like I think the whole thing with Umpty, even I'm not blaming him for it, it was like the catalyst of it. But then from there, it was just like vicious cycle of like underperform, tilt, underperform, lose trust, underperform, tilt, underperform, lose trust, and then even though we'd have the conversations I said earlier, where we talk about everything that we think is going wrong, a week later we'd have the same cycle starting. It's hard to drop the baggage of all that stuff because you've been on a team like know everyone so well at this point.
And what would you say were the main contributions to your personal like drop off in skill or impacts as well? Because I think that you're right. That was like something that was definitely noticeable. Like Impact, for example, kind of felt like he dropped off a cliff at certain points during the year.
I think a lot of it just like is some to blame for myself and him, but it's also it's the phrase like the same pressure that forges the diamonds crushes
Yeah, I get that. I
the
get what you're
same thing.
saying. Yeah.
So it's like that phrase. I forget what the actual phrase is,
Hmm.
but it's like that. The same pressure that made us as good as we were in 2024 was applied to us in 2025 when we didn't have like any way to alleviate that pressure, and it was just too much for us to perform. And like I think if I really want to be honest as well, like I don't think like Jan or Core were the reasons we were losing, to be completely honest. But I think they also started to underperform as well towards the end of the year, just because like that same pressure that was hitting us was also hitting them.
And I suppose if you've got this structure whereby it's a case where it really works really well when everything's going well, but then it works horrifically when it's going bad, you have to, in hindsight, ask yourself what the kind of potential of this team was. If it had continued to go right and you didn't face any of these issues, what do you think would be different
Um,
in terms of what you
I
could have
think this
achieved?
year we would have been like the top two team within FlagWest. I think we both our teams last year were pushing each other up. I think we would have continued to push each other up. So like maybe if we didn't boom as a team, we would have pushed FlagWest up into making quarters or even semis. Or like maybe this would have been our year to make quarters and like do well at Worlds or MSI or whatever. Um, but I don't know. I think we were a fucking good team when we were playing at our best. Like all five of us were playing at our best.
But do you not think, in comparison to FlyQuest, you talked about the difficulty when you arrive at Eastern competition is that you're very good at one thing and they're very good at like a lot of different things. Do you not think that FlyQuest in some ways is a bit more flexible in terms of their allocation of where their skill is? It felt like during at some points, maybe it's not the case after lane swaps, and you can tell me, but it felt like you were always very maxed out on one thing, whereas FlyQuest is a little bit more evenly distributed. Would that be fair to say?
No,
Okay.
I don't think so. I think Black was this year was worse than they were last year, which might be a hot topic to say. I think just the competition this year and then it was just worse. Like the
What?
top team is TL boomed, like C9 in my opinion boomed as well. Um, so you have teams who, in my opinion, weren't that good, like 100 Thieves and Shopify, as like the second and third best team. But I think last year, for example, like I said, I think we were both pushing each other up because I think we were genuinely both two good teams last year.
Hmm. But talk to
But
me
then
about
this year, I don't think there was a second good team.
sure. But what did they get worse at this year? I mean, or does it just come as simply as down to iron sharpens iron, and therefore they weren't as sharp, or do you think they're a
Yeah, I think
definitive?
it's just that. Like,
Yeah.
I think it's just everyone else around them was worse, so it's hard for them to improve what they're it's hard for them to improve on themselves when they can just come in and farm the league. Like I remember, like I watched the interview you did with Inspired, and like he said it himself, like the league this year was so free because no one was good. Like I agree with that because everyone around him that was good just disappeared.
How does that make you feel? Because I suppose you must be looking on at the competition at Worlds and just being like, "Oh fuck!" Like I don't imagine you think 100 Thieves were very good, for example, and you must have felt like you wanted to be there and you wanted to be part of that iron sharpening iron. So how much did that piss you off having to watch that from afar?
Um, maybe like envious or jealous. I guess a good way to put it. Like I don't think these players are demonstrably better than me. I don't think they're like in some regard even better than me at all. So it was just like I don't know. I fucking hated it. That's all.
How do you get because you strike me as someone that you're so interesting when I kind of witness you and I view you because it's like there's so clearly a lot of emotions, but there's also such a shell of kind of nonchalance and you don't really let it peer past the face, so to speak. So I wonder how do you process anger and how does it exit you? Are you like a boxing guy? Are you a catharsis guy? How do you let it out? Like how do you?
Um, well, like for example, I can give you like in scrims, I would just get really annoyed and like I wouldn't really yell, but just like passionately have a conversation, whoever the conversation was with, and like probably 10 minutes I'd be fine. I don't know, like maybe I'm weird in that sense where it's like a flash of emotions, like a flash in the pan. Like I'll be mad for a very short amount of time, and then I'll process it and take it, and like this is what I need to do to continue going forward.
Did TL at any point in this year descend into kind of shouting and screaming matches? Did it ever get to that
Um,
point?
I mean, I think like Spawn shouted, but Spawn shout Spawn was shouting at me in Academy. Spawn was shouting at like everyone last year.
For
I
for for your
would probably
relation
assume he's gonna shout next year.
for your relationship with Spawn, I suppose it's one of those things where it's like he's someone when I've spoken to him, I just have such an immense respect for because it's like I can't imagine him. I think he's a bit older than me, probably a lot older than me to be fair. But it's like, well,
Like
obviously when
mid
you,
30s, I think.
yeah, so he's about 10 years older than me. So it's one of those things where it's like, but even like I meet Dom and Dom's 10 years older than me, and it's like I still feel like I can go and have a drink with him. Still feel like I can have a drink with Spawn, but it's like I've got a definitive feeling of like oh, this guy could be like my baseball coach, or like this guy could be my football coach, or like whatever. It's like he has a very different air about him. So I suppose when you talk about it being not something that would like frighten you or like be weird to you to have him shout at you, I suppose talk to me about that because you obviously were personally close to him to some capacity, but he's also a guy that would flip his shit at you if he had to.
Um, I mean, Spawn's a no bullshit type of guy. Like I've pretty much worked with him like my entire professional career at this point. He was my coach in academy, if you didn't know. And then when I got moved up, he also got promoted at the same time I got promoted. So I've worked with him basically for 3 years straight. But not all of that has been easy because like I consider myself a very passionate person, and at some points a very stubborn person within like how I view the game and how like I want things to happen around me within the game. And I think if you would ask him, I think he's also a very stubborn person on how he views the game and how he like wants things to move around in the game. So like when those ideas would clash, it was just like very, like I said, the flash in the pan, where it's like just two hot-headed people having a conversation because we're extremely passionate about what we believe in. But then,
What's the most explosive story of like an argument between you two in the kind of the heat of I don't want to say the heat of passion because it sounds like you kissed each other, but you know what I mean. Like, what's the most tense it's gotten? Like, what's the biggest argument?
um, it's not gone to the point where like we're like in each other's face, like
No, of course
balling
not.
our fists or
No,
anything.
I
But
wasn't implying it
uh,
was, but yeah.
but I think he's told me the story a few times, and he's told the story to others. Where in academy, because I was like probably 30, 40 pounds heavier, like mostly fat, but some for sure muscle, and I was like just bigger than him. And of course, like within my wrestling background, everything I like stood up and I was like really angry at the time. Like nothing ever happened, but he told me afterwards he thought to himself that like, that's why he's so jacked now. Like he needs to get bigger than me so if that ever happens again, like he can be confident that he can like hold his own. Um,
Jesus.
like
That's,
of course, like we've never raised hands at each other or anything.
but I think
I don't
any
even think I've
any
screamed at him,
argument
but
between two males that is just like in that sense like loud and passionate is gonna
yeah.
have like a subconscious physical backdrop to it, even if it would never go to that point. Like it is just you just do
Hmm.
inevitably it becomes like when you're not thinking it's like two gorillas facing off, right? Like at the end of the day.
Yeah, in a sense, yeah.
But is that seems like it'd be quite a unique relationship of conflict resolution between the two of you, because you both seem like you're both people that would maybe go and shout, whereas Yon, from every interaction I've had with him, doesn't seem like he's capable of shouting. Probably at best like being passive aggressive. Impact, I can imagine getting pissed off, but like not being confident quite enough in English to where it's shouting in English. Maybe it's more just like swearing in Korean and stuff like that. I'm making up a fanfic in my head, but you can tell me the reality. What does some of this anger? How does it manifest with the other people in this team when it was really bad?
Um, I mean, with Impact, it's like even when he's mad, he would just tell you how it is. Like when you would int him, he would just tell you he's inting you, and like towards the end, it would like he's 0-10 on Sion or whatever, and then he'd go and flame me or go and flame Yuuji or Yon or whoever, and be like, "But wait, why are you doing this?" Like, and the entire time you're thinking in the back of your head, like, "You're fucking inting me this game. Why are you talking to me like this?" But then he's like actually trying to give you feedback. That's just the person who it is. Um, I think with Yon, you kind of nail it right on top of the head. He just gets passive aggressive. Um, the only person who I didn't really see mad was Yuuji, even though we haven't talked about him too much this interview. Like, I think mostly just because he didn't really know us as people. Like, wasn't here for that long with us, 3-4 months. But he's always just cool, calm, and collected. And then even when because he was so funny, because he'd have like a straight face on, he'd be smiling, and he'd look you in the eyes and be like, "Eain, I'm crashing out." And he just seems like such a calm person, and he's just telling you he's crashing out.
That is very that's a very interesting insight into it's almost that thing of like when you meet people that like are able to completely like mask that they're having panic attacks and they like very calmly tell you like I'm having a panic attack, but it's like, are you sure? Like you look fine. That's very interesting. And I suppose there is a similarity with you there because we talked about although you exist in flashes of anger, you can't really tell what you're thinking at any point. You kind of have the same expression maybe 80% of the time.
I would say so, yeah.
Where does that come from? Do you understand that or like because it almost feels like a concealing thing, but it's interesting by no means.
To be honest, I'm not sure. It's just who I am.
Respect. It's good. It makes it more difficult as an interview. It feels like you were hiding something.
What am I hiding?
Well, that's what we're aiming to find out, I suppose. Um, but we've talked about a lot about TL and its kind of. I think I'm getting a pretty decent picture of where TL failed, and I suppose we've got the overarching, and it's more about anecdotal now. I mean, we spoke about Yuji there. I kind of wanted to ask you, might be an unfair question in some ways, but he got quite a. It's difficult not to feel really bad for him this year. He came into a team where it's a not so great environment by all descriptions. Has to fill decently big shoes, although MT's underperforming. He still was pretty successful and doing his job. He's a role player for sure. He's got to come in there. He's got no tier one experience. He's coming up from academy. He's also got all these difficulties with like import slot, all of this bullshit and
Hmm.
whatnot. And he came into a team that was one of the best and now is kind of struggling and didn't really achieve much and is probably now in a position where he's not really going to have much offers and is definitely his career arguably might have been damaged by this. So how do you feel about that, having spent this amount of time with him?
Um, I feel bad for him. Like, I told him this to himself as well, and like I would even tell him to watch this interview because I'll talk with a little bit because I like Yuji a lot. But I think when he came in, he was like a good player, and he a good player, but he was a different player than Umpty, and a different player than the shoes that Umpty filled, is the way to put it. And I think since he joined just a sinking ship of a team, Like I don't think anyone would have saved us, to be completely honest. Like by the time he joined, he just became worse because everyone around becoming worse, and I think he just had like a bad showing because of that. But I don't think it was because of him. But I genuinely do feel bad for him, and like I think the whole thing with how he's considered like a EU resident, even though he's from Mongolia, doesn't really still make sense to me. Um, so like I feel bad for him within that regard. Like I feel like he should be considered an NA resident with like how much he's just played here and like his whole career is here, I guess. So like going into the off season with the teams I've talked to, a lot of it was just like some of the lower teams I was talking to, they would bring him up in conversation and be like, "Is he still an import?" And I would go, "Yeah, he's still an import." And then the conversation would like die down because when you consider an import, it's like when you bring an import onto the team, you probably imagine they're supposed to be your best player on the team because that's just how it is. But then he's not going to be the best player because he's still a rookie. He's still an rookie.
But you think he's good
So I
enough
feel
to
bad
play?
for
You
him
think
within
he's
that.
good? You think he's good enough to play LCS though?
Yeah, I think so. I think he just had a bad showing, which is a bad team. And there's honestly nothing he could have done. I think any other player would have done just as bad as he did. And like, I hope he can get another shot. But like, realistically, considered that he's considered as an import, it's probably gonna be really hard for him, which I feel bad for him.
Yeah, it's tricky for sure. One of the quotes that I saw, I think I can't remember where you gave it, but shout out to the outlet. I'm sure you'll remember, and then we can give them a proper shout out. But I saw you gave an interview where you said that something, I don't want to misquote you on this, but something along the lines of you don't imagine many of the people on this team would want to play with each other in the future, or something like this.
It was with the NA men
And Aemon, yeah,
quote. And,
but
um,
that is around about
it-
what you said, right?
I said, fuck, I'm gonna mess up my own quote too. But it was like, I would be willing to play with everyone, but I don't think everyone would be willing to play with ev- like everyone, including that as well. Like I think as individual players, like I'd be willing to work with Impact, Umpty, Yuuji, Yon, and Corrigan. But I think as a team, I wouldn't want to work with.
What do you think were the most strained bonds from this year? Like, what do you think in terms of like not maybe because it's so often it's not that the personal goes away from the gameplay, but in terms of like direct teammate relationships, what do you think were the most damaged after this year? Like, who were people that like really could not stand working with each other by the end of it?
Um,
If you're comfortable answering.
I don't want to dish out anyone else's like dirty laundry or however you want to put it. Like I think for myself though, I have like pretty good relationships. Pretty much everyone on the team still. Like for most of the offseason, you just sat straight to my left, and I talk with him every day. Like I still talk with Impact pretty often. I talk with Jan like pretty often. The only person I don't talk to, and same thing I said in that interview, is like I don't really talk to Core that much, but it's more so just like he's just a much older, much mature person than me, so it's hard to relate to him other than like past the league. But we're no longer teammates, so it's hard to
Yeah,
have that conversation.
I must say when I interviewed Core at MSI, not MSI, that first time, there's a reason I didn't post it was because it very much felt like I was trying to make jokes with like my granddad, and like he just was not like he was indulging me, like he was being very polite, like he was just being like,
Yeah,
yeah, but like it was
he's
just like,
just a very polite, mature guy.
yeah,
So like if Core was, I mean, it's gonna sound funny. If Core is more immature, I'd probably have a better relationship with them and like talk to him more. But since he's who he is as a person, like I don't. But that's no like that's not because I don't like him. It's just because can't really relate.
that's fair. I suppose before we move on from TL, talking about TL, I kind of wanted to just as an appendage or a footnote at the end of it, just talk about kind of because we talked about kind of the overarching structure, and obviously there's a lot of difficulty and sensitivity, and as an interviewer and as talking to you, very careful in not throwing anyone individual under the bus. But I wonder if potentially the story here is too shallow, and in terms of what you're hinting at, we can get the general theme, but it's shallow in regards to the fact it doesn't have like pure anecdotal stories. So I wonder if there's any like kind of anecdotal stories you can tell us that kind of denote or kind of sum up the year, things that happen where trust was lost or difficult times, without throwing anyone under the bus, because it's I don't want to ask you in abstract terms who the problems were, but I wondered if via the method of story we could more substance based
Mm,
come to an evaluation of why TL struggled this year.
Um, that's hard. I don't know if I have any stories, like off the top of my head at least.
That's fair. If anything come to, we can come back to it. I suppose
Sure.
another question I want to ask you is trash talk has kind of been the name of your game, and you talked about that having an origin from your wrestling days. But
hmm
what would you say that your best trash talk moments? Like when are the times you think you've gotten in the heads of people? I saw that Vulcan was saying that he had you muted on TR at one point, and I presume half of the league did at some point. But for you, what are your favorite trash talk moments, both domestically and internationally? Things you've typed
Um,
or done?
well, one that I always found funny was this was last year at MSI when I trash talked TN when I faced Top Esports, and he just said shut up, like in chat, and I think they ended up showing it on broadcast. I'm sure you could find the screenshot if
Yeah.
you search hard enough for it. But I found that pretty fucking funny because like no one's ever just been like shut up before. The TN was definitely giga chat for just saying that. I think other funny moments was just like when I was newer to the league, and I would always criticize them losing by losing to me. I'd be like, "You're so bad, you're losing to APA." And I always found those that's kind of funny.
Are you trash talking in scrims as well, or not really? Is it purely like a stage thing?
No, just stage. I don't like. I think at like practice, you should just try your best to get the best practice. And if you're trash talking, you're gonna even if it's like only a little bit, you're gonna like ruin your practice a little bit.
Because part of you doing it in officials is you don't just do it for show. You think there's a psychological advantage,
Yeah.
and you're comfortable getting any sort of edge. What other edges are you exhibiting, kind of like what, psychologically? Because you're one of the only players I've ever heard. I don't think you've even talked about it publicly, but I've discussed it with you. One of the only players that seems to have an interest in psychological warfare, so to speak.
Um, I make really long eye contact when I can with the opponent players. Like the example I can probably give is at first stand, they would line you up in like the LCK tunnel, whatever it is, and it's like top, jungle, mid,
Yeah,
so on,
yeah,
so on,
yeah.
and they're 5 feet away from you. You're there for like 10 minutes or so, 10, 15 minutes, however the guy tells you to line up for, and just wait there until they call you on stage. And I would just stare at the enemy like opponents, whoever would look at me for as long as I could. I wouldn't talk to them. I wouldn't smile. It'd just be straight face and just be staring.
So you were staring at Zeka for 10 minutes straight.
Yeah.
And how did he react to that? Or did he give you any reaction?
Um, he started chuckling a little bit, and then he, like most players, just started to look away.
I suppose it reminds me very much of this hilarious anecdote for anyone who follows boxing out there that remember this. Tyson Fury, like before he became like really famous, the first time he fought Klitschko, not the first time, but just the time he fought Klitschko, he tells this story about how when he was like an up and coming boxer and Vladimir Klitschko was like the best boxer and best heavyweight in the world, they got into a sauna together. And then like Tyson Fury was saying that like a competition started in that moment, like who would get out of the sauna last. And like Klitschko's just in the interview saying like that, I don't know, like maybe that happened, but like it's like fantasy, like it was only a competition to you. And then Fury's just going, no, it was a competition and I won that day, and that's how I know I'm going to beat you. It kind of reminds me of that in terms of like you're just staring at these people thinking that it's generating an advantage. Do you feel that what kind of an advantage do you feel that you're getting in that moment?
I think like in like any other sports, like you have to do a lot of thinking. Like of course, it's, muscle reaction and all that stuff, but a lot of it's just thinking. And if you're thinking about why some weird white guy's staring me in the eyes for 10 minutes, rather than about like what you're gonna pick in champ select or whatever, even like small things like that can just throw you off.
What was the best reaction you got from staring at people at first hand? Like who of the
Um,
players was best?
I did it to KCU. KCU was probably the longest. I did it to them for probably about 30 minutes, and then they just started like chuckling towards the end because they're like, "You're still doing it," and I don't know. I always kind of find it funny when people just can't look someone else in the eyes.
Did are you breaking at any point? Are you laughing as well, or are you just keeping serious the entire time?
I would probably say at some points I was, but like 90 some percent of the time I would be.
That's fair enough. And then there's other weird things you do. Like for example, I don't know if you've ever talked about this, but you always rush off after you finish a game. You like literally you don't wait for anyone else. You get up straight away when the game's done and you rush into the tunnel like really, really quickly. Why do you do that?
Yeah. Well, sometimes because I have to pee. Other times it's just because I don't like. I just want to think about the game more in the where there's a quieter environment. Because of course, when you're on stage, it's loud. Or there's fans cheering, that like casters talking, and like if I want to think quietly about the game, I just go into our team room and like talk with our coaches or the other teammates. But sometimes it is I just have to piss.
It's fair. And what would you say? Are there any other moments of trash talk in all chat that you've kind of typed that you consider personal favorites?
Um, it's hard to say for this year. A, because we suck, but B, because um I forget his name, but one of the stats guy for LCS, he has access to like TR numbers, and there's like 80% of the league is blocked. There's like no point to even type to them anymore.
That's
So
quite
it's
that's
like
quite sad.
if I'm typing, it's more so typing to like the LCS fans rather than the actual players at
What
this point.
do you get a new TR account because you're on C9? Maybe it's a fresh start for you, or is it the same account?
I think it's the same account because I've had the same account since when I was on like Maryville and other amateur teams.
Damn, that's quite sad. They've silenced you. They've taken away your advantage from you. Have you thought about other like what other like theories have you had? Like, have you had any ideas about how to like exploit psychological warfare advantages over people? Like, what could we maybe
Um,
expect in 2026?
I always think about stuff like this, like especially because I'm going to Korea, like especially when I'm on flights and like waiting. I always have like long thinks to myself about whatever. So I'm sure I'll have some revelations after my Korea trip, and maybe you'll see some next year.
But you don't have any that you could share with us now.
No, recently it's all just been leaked.
That's fair enough. We talked about kind of in terms of TL's difficulties. We talked a little bit about the problem with UMT. Talked about the problem with the kind of approaches to the start approaches, strict versus hardness. But in terms of, I guess in being fair to him and being kind of emotionally empathetic, in that he obviously had a lot of responsibilities he had to handle as a man, as a father. How much of an impact was Spawn not being around for quite a lot of the time?
I think pretty big impact. I think the coach he was when he's here is just not the coach he was when he's away. I don't know how he's gonna do it this year, if he's gonna be like in person or like half like he was. Like I talked about a little bit firsthand where I think like he's our best drafter, and then we use Swiffer. Like I don't think gave us the best drafts. Um, and just I I think he was more of a personable coach is the best way to put it. Like he understands the game to a high enough level, so he's not stupid in that regards. But he's like I would say his skill set is more having people define their standards and holding them to those standards while also adapting within the game. And then it's just harder to do that over a Discord call than if you were like right next to you looking over your shoulder.
And famously, like a lot of these, like I remember seeing them, like a lot of these, like post-game speech, not post-game, like pre-game speeches, like hype up motivational talks. Like Team Liquid would like film them and put them on social media. Like for you personally, like how much of an emotionally resonant effect did that have? Were these affected? Did these pump you up?
Um, some would, yeah. Trying to remember, it was like a s- series last year. I forget who was verse. It was like when had like two losers, so we were in like the best of three, and then he gave us a speech and it like set my mind straight. And of course, You can't really do that when you're down in Australia.
In the land down under. Oh, can you remember what it was he said to you that got you going?
I honestly don't recall. I just remember it, like my mind was
Would have been Gam or Pain Gaming, maybe.
it was Gam, Pain, or Fly. It was one of those three. But I just remember he like my mind wasn't like I was upset at the loss or whatever. I think the loss I felt like was my fault, and then he like reset me.
But then the question comes to me that's difficult, and not to be obsequious or even facetious in what you're saying, but if he can hit those reset buttons, and it seemed like all you needed that year was a reset button for all of you, was maybe it's an unfair question because it's difficult. It's different when you're in it and you're there and you're playing to hit that reset button. But if that's all you needed all year, surely then the solution would have been for him to be more present, and that kind of adds a lot more instability. The fact that he wasn't in providing that reset. I guess my question is, how
Yeah,
much did him not being there prevent resets from being made?
I think like a like definitely had some effect. Like I don't. It's hard to guess or estimate like how much affected. Like if Spawn was here this entire year, would we have mental boomed? The answer to the question is I don't know. Like maybe we wouldn't have. Maybe we would have. So and like
Sure, but it sounds like
and then he's just
he was preventing you from mental booming before, or was he not having that much impact on it before?
mm, we just weren't experiencing the same things as we were last year.
Okay, that's fair.
So it's hard to. That's why it's hard to like say.
So you don't have the comparison of him helping you get through rough times necessarily.
Not in that same vein as to like just how much mental boomed we were. Because at some points he was here during the year,
Sure.
like when we were mental boom, of course, and then nothing changed. So like it's truly hard to say like at least from my end that if he was here more, we just wouldn't have mental boomed. We would have been a great team this year,
Yeah,
and
no.
because I don't even know if that's the case.
It's fair. I suppose I was asking the question because it's just it. What I'm getting from you is that you guys just kind of at one point just needed a put back to zero net kind of kind of a neutrality point because it seemed like so much of this was entrenched in kind of a vicious cycle. And often what you
Yeah.
need in a vicious cycle is just to go back to the start and kind of start over again. But seemingly from what you're saying, there was nothing that could have provided that.
Well, I think we did have those conversations. I think at that point, by the time we did have those conversations, the hole per se was too deep of a hole. Like maybe if it started when like the only thing I can think of is like when the whole thing with Umpty started happening with his family, and like that, like the downfall catalyst, if you want to put it that way, started happening. If he was there then, maybe it would have made everything better. But like
But yeah,
truly, it's hard to say.
of course, you never want to kind of stake speculation on these things because it's just so complicated and whatnot. And in no way am I implying that he's responsible for it, but it's you have to analyze these factors. I suppose from you talked about that kind of the conception point of the catalyst of the downfall, umpty or whatever. Would it be like in terms? I think an important theme in teams when they experience difficulty is like lack of trust. Would you say that that was
Yeah,
a thing that was happening over the course of the year, kind of trust eroding? 'Cause
oh for sure. I mean, like I think I said it to you as well earlier, maybe just in messages. But it's like I don't think our player skill level was that of a team that couldn't compete, even in our most recent playoffs. It was just our team fundamentals were too eroded, like too just not there to compete. Like I remember our FlagWest series. I never felt like FlagWest was like completely gapping us in lane to the point where we can like play the game. It was just we make it a mid game versus them, and then they just run us around the map and then out team fight us.
it's fair. And when trust kind of erodes on a team, like, is it a thing of like, how do you exist within that moment? Because it's like, I suppose in League, it's a thing where so many scenarios must occur where it's you're relying on someone to hit a skill shot, and maybe just subconsciously you're not thinking they're going to do it, and therefore maybe you don't engage into the skirmish because you don't think it looks good, because you don't think that people are going to hit their skill shots. Talk to me a little bit about how it looks like when trust fades from a team.
I think it's less of that. It's more of just trust within calls.
Okay.
Like an example I can give is like I don't know why I remember this play, but it's when played against C9 in the second split, spring split. He made like this Gromp invade. Uh, I forget what he was playing. I know Blabber was playing Lilia, but he made a Gromp invade, or maybe he was playing Lilia. Sorry, I'm sure people can find the game later if they actually care. But he made a Gromp invade, and when he made the call, I had very little trust in him as a teammate, and so I didn't follow the call. Like I think I could have had Prow, but I chose not to have the Prow, and Loki ended up moving first. And it's just like I think that's a good example I can give where, if I had high trust with him, if I had high trust within the play he was calling, I would have taken my mid pro and moved to him. But since I didn't trust his play, and I didn't trust, we didn't have that reputation that was going well for us at the time. I didn't.
But forgive me for kind of the bluntness, but is that not kind of just very troll from both ends? Because it's a thing where you're not following the call, which is one of the kind of the central rules. I hear every coach just say, commit to the call, we'll talk about the mistake afterwards. But then equally on his end, when presumably when you call it off, he's still going for it. So that doesn't only just speak to trust, it speaks to kind of just complete mismatch in directions being pulled. It's almost like a tug of war.
Generally, yeah. I mean, to play a good game of League, you have to have the backings of your team. And this is just one example. It was happening between Yon and Umpty, between Impact and me, between Impact and Core. Everyone was doing it within the team.
For sure, of course.
It was just to play a good game of League, in my opinion, you need to play as a team. But then we just weren't playing as a team. Everyone was playing for their own individual leads because no one else trusted anyone else to carry. But
I,
then even when they would get those individual leads, you couldn't carry.
wow, that's quite an indictment. I suppose to go back to what I'm saying, it's more about what I was asking is where does the mentality stem from of, well, presumably you didn't think it was good and therefore you're not making it happen. Are you saying that you don't want the Gromp invade and then it's happening anyway, or more so
Mm,
you're just kind of subconsciously leading yourself towards not playing towards it?
I think in that play I said I'm not gonna go or not gonna move, if I recall correctly, and he decided to do it anyways. But I think it was just he felt like that was his only play, if I recall, that he could do. So
Yeah.
even though I didn't know or I didn't feel like it was a good play, yeah.
I think a criticism that a lot of people had over the course of 2024 and even 2025 is like even when you guys were doing really well, it sometimes felt that would make not uncharacteristic because it was happening semi often, but like game costing mistakes. Although like he was a player that kind of inhabited a role, so to speak, and Spawn quite often spoke about that. It felt like there were things happening in the game that were kind of just like quite strange from him quite often. What would you equate that to? Because a lot of it can be explained in 2025 by what you're talking about in terms of the outside of game problems, but it seemed like there was a problem throughout a lot of his tenure at TL. Was that coming down to potentially factors that were beyond his control as well? Because so much of what happens in League, sometimes mid is getting trolled by jungler, but then we blame the mid. So many factors are interconnected behind things that people can't see.
Um, I think to be honest, that's just the way he played the game. Literally, he I don't want to call it coin flip because I think it was calculated aggression, but sometimes the calculated aggression, either isn't calculated to the T or as a small misplay happens on his end or whatever. But I think, to be honest, I think a lot of the winter split umpty got scapegoated just because the plays he made good were glossed over or highlighted as someone else playing well.
Okay.
If he made a Raptor invade with me and we got a 2v2 kill, I would be hyped up, what a great play from APA instead of, when it was Umpty's call behind the scenes. But then when you'd see him do the Gromp invade and int on the Gromp invade, like I talked about,
That's partly
It
your
was
fault as well, right? Like,
it's partly my fault, but then he's the one getting blamed for it.
yeah, exactly.
So like he's getting scapegoated, but then the plays that he does that are equally as good are not getting highlighted.
That's interesting. I suppose that's a part of doing these interviews is kind of not subverting narratives, but more like adding the context that people maybe can't see. So I'm glad to hear that perspective on Umti because I think he did get a little bit of a hard rep. Obviously, there were times where he was underperforming, but yeah, I think it's fair to say he got a little bit of a hard rep. I think someone who gave him a little bit of a hard rep was actually one of your coaches right now. I think I Will Dominate was giving him a bit of a hard time at times.
Um, yeah, I think Dom was a hater. That's all.
What's your relationship like with Dom? Because I actually view you quite similarly in terms of you're both quite hateful people. You've got a bit of hate in your heart.
Uh, we don't know each other too much right now. Like we actually like way back when we used to duo, like when he grinded the game a lot. But other than that, like haven't really had a relationship. Like he did an interview with me last year, and like before now, like before joining C9, that's really the last time I truly spoke with him as a person.
What was that talk like? Tell me the ins and outs of it. What was the talk like with Dom? Because presumably it's about you being a fit for C9, I'll assume, in some ways.
Maybe either I'm misunderstanding or you understood. Like my last talk with him was last year.
Oh, but you said you had a talk with him when you joined C9, no?
Did I?
Okay,
Okay, regardless, I did.
I misunderstood.
Yeah, that's fine.
But yeah, sorry, I lost my train of thought there a little bit. But in terms of joining C9, in some ways, obviously, you're a benefit of unfortunate circumstances in that Loki obviously has had extenuating circumstances that prevent him from being played. But I wondered how this offseason looked for you. You're probably presumably happy in some ways that this spot opened up, but what would have this offseason looked like if basically what did the offseason look like for you, I guess?
Um, I had a few offers from lower tier teams, and I was still in conversations with like middle pack teams. And like I don't know if I was like gonna get those slots or not because I think they're also interested in Korean mids. And then I did have a lot of conversations with a bunch of EU teams, but generally they didn't want to take me. It's just the only way to put it.
Oh, so you were
Which
reaching out
like
and they weren't interested, or
we would have conversations. Like I reached out to a fair amount of teams, and like honestly all of
would you
them.
be willing to say who, or
Yeah, like I reached out to like KC had a couple conversations with the KC guys, like with Vitality, Heretics, SK before. Like this is like a month ago before everything's finalized and everything. Um, Navi, like generally a fair amount of the
it's a
EU
shame.
teams.
It's a shame you didn't realize that SK Gaming locked their mid laner about 6 months ago.
That's true. Um, um, and generally I would have like a decent amount of calls with all these teams. They just decided to go other places, which is fine. Like I mean they'll regret it later because I'll shit on them whenever the next international comes, or even if they make it. But like I had good conversations with them. Like I had like middle ground or like middle of teams interested in me in NA. And then like of course the C9 thing just felt like it was literally just random. Like the C9 GM just added me on Discord, and like I didn't even reach out to C9 because from what I understood, C9 was keeping Loki. The only reason I have this spot is because Loki had, like you said, like just family health issues.
Fair. I guess my question would be one thing I'm interested in is Korean mid laners that are coming to NA. Korean mid laners we seem to be back in the import phase, especially in Europe. NA has always been in an import phase because you guys really suck at League of Legends, but EU kind of is going back to their import phase. Some of the mid laners are coming to the league. Zinni, for example, is someone that for the last 2 years people talk to me like he's the King Von of mid lane. Like he's someone that everyone fears. I don't think anyone's actually ever watched a game of his, but presumably you have, and I know people in the scene have.
Oh,
How do
I haven't either. Don't worry.
Okay, cool. Someone who's honest for once. How do you think you stack up against some of these LCKCL mid laners?
Well, other than the past two splits, I've been taking them down my entire career, so I'll probably keep that up. because everyone says they're the next Faker. Like you look at Saint, everyone said this guy was going to be the best player in the league, and then got 8th 3 times in a row.
You don't think he
So
was? You don't think
like,
he was individually that good, or is that not
I mean,
results-based analysis?
he wasn't the 8th best mid laner, sure, but like to say he was the best player in the league or the best mid laner in the league is like come on, you have to be kidding.
Where would you put him?
Y-
You put him in fifth?
I would say he's like a top 5 mid this year, but
Wow.
like
Okay.
for
Okay.
people, like people would genuinely said to me and like to others, like on Twitter or whatever, that he was the best mid this year.
Which-
Come on, you're the best mid in the league, getting last place 3 times in a row. Like no flame to him, I genuinely like him, but like you can't be the best getting those results. You know, if I got those results, I'd be out of the league this next year.
Them's fighting words, man. I wanted to ask you, in terms of, I don't know how much like national pride you have, if you're like a kind of a Bruce Springsteen kind of like born in the USA kind of guy. I don't get that impression from you, although the mustache might swayed me the other
I'm gonna bring
way.
it back.
Yeah, but my question is, as kind of one of the only North American mid laners, and pretty much at this point, the way things are going, one of the only North American players who plays in North America, it's kind of only really you and Parlofox who play, and it doesn't look like it maybe doesn't look like Parlofox will be playing.
And
Um,
Darkness, but yeah.
and Darkwings as well. I forgot about him. Sorry, that's my lack of NA knowledge. But with as being one of the only people and probably the most elite, at least in the last 2 years out of those two, obviously Parlofox had a great 2023. How much like pride do you feel in terms of performing as an NA mid?
I mean, definitely a lot of pride. Like you know, like my entire league is getting imported. Like especially my entire role is getting imported to the LCK Challengers League. So to keep my spot and keep my spot on like a top tier team, like you know, reinforces ideas that I think about myself. Where like I think I'm good, so you know, other people think I'm equally as good and gave me this spot. Like I hope I don't let them down. And I hope not to let myself down as well. There's definitely some semblance of pride, and then it's also just like I don't know if it's ignorance or like to be honest what it is, but it seems like I mean you mentioned it as well, but like the old import league, but it's like every team's gonna fill out their import slots no matter what this year, and that kind of feels bad when even if there necessarily aren't like that many great players coming in from academy, it feels like those players should at least be given chances,
Do you,
just like just to try because like if you're gonna be like a dig and toss, like dig and toss is surely gonna have 2 imports to be completely honest, and they're still probably gonna get 6th place.
do you look at a team like Dignitas and just think, well, you guys are going to suck anyway? You should be like developing NA talent and doing something good for the league.
Yeah, like I genuinely like why like doesn't matter if you get 6th place with 2 LCK imports that you're gonna play more than minimum, or you know random NA rookie that might become a good player.
Yeah, true. Do you feel, in terms of maybe I'm over Americanizing you, but I think so much of America is caricature that you can't blame me for doing so. Do you, in some ways, feel as one of the most, well, the kind of the NA mid laner of the last couple of years? Do you feel, in some ways, like a hometown hero, like someone that people can look up to in the academy and kind of an example, a proof that you can be
Um,
an NA mid laner and make it?
to be honest, I'd hope so. Like I mean, I think you're even underselling it. How much like I hope to be that pride because like I truly think to be able to compete internationally is like to promote talent within and to like promote everyone within and then I'm sure like if you ask any like current tier 2 pro or even tier 3 pro and how it feels to try and make it up within the scene, they probably tell you it's like it feels impossible.
Hmm.
So like from their perspective, it fucking sucks.
But I'm going to do you the favor of you. The question was a bait question in order for you to reveal something nice that you've been doing recently, but you're far too humble. Unlike others, lots of other people in the scene, they do nice things and it turns into a tweet immediately. But you've been helping out with the combine recently, haven't you? That's part of the reason why our interview was delayed in some
I
capacity.
was going to, but then other things came in part of it.
Oh,
I
never
did have
mind.
a lot of messages with Parth about it. It just things couldn't align.
But in general, you're someone that is like willing to help out tier two and stuff like this, and you quite often
Yeah.
collaborate with Maryville, and I think you've been back there a few times and probably provided some
Hmm.
help in that capacity. So I wanted to give you
Yeah,
a bit of a layup in that sense. You're not just someone that says he wants to be an inspiration. You're kind of actively participating in the bettering of the future, aren't you?
yeah. I mean, like, I don't know. I think for our region to ever be good, like, we can't keep importing bad players from LCK. We have to make our own good players.
They're all bad.
So
You're saying that
not
they're
all
all.
of them. Like some are good, some are good, but not all of them are good.
Who's bad?
They're all. Uh, I mean, you want to keep me beating on the dog, Caney?
Wow, wow, man. You're starting to sound like, at the risk of saying this, you're starting to sound like a certain leader in the US. You're saying the LCKCL, that when they send their players, they're not sending their best. It's kind of like a direct. I'm getting a little bit worried,
Oh, I think they are sending their best.
but their best isn't
Like I
good
think
enough.
Cindy, it can be, but I think like how do I put it? They're they're setting their second league's best, not their first league's best.
Of course. Does that play into the mentality a little bit for you in terms of like you've got to think, well, I suppose it's the thing. That was always the thing for me that felt awkward, and it's why I think so. Romain famously has an anti-import stance. The GM of G2. It's why G2 like hasn't imported since they had like Trick and Emperor back in like 2017 or something crazy. It's been like 8 years of no importing. The idea for me is just a thing of, well, if they were good enough to play in the LCK, then they would play in the LCK. So if they're here, then they're not good enough to play there, and that's the region we're trying to beat. How much of that factors into it? I suppose it is awkward given the fact that you have played with LCK players before, but how much of that
Um,
factors into it?
I mean, like some of it, like of course you can argue, or it's like if they like different team environment, they can perform better. Like, I mean, I think it's no surprise that I think Umti performed better on TL than he did on Bro,
Sure,
given the nature of how Bro is as a team. But then like
you're not a pro lever,
not a Bro lever.
unfortunate.
But then I don't know. Like I think to make our region good, we have to be promoting native talent, be like actively trying to make everyone improve around them. And then like look at this year, for example. How many NA rookies were promoted? I think it was Scary Jerry and Yuuji.
Dark Wings as well, right? Or was he already playing?
And sorry, Dark Wings, yeah. Sorry, those three.
Are
But
there
like
any?
who else?
Yeah, not many. It's kind of crazy, really. Whereas you look at like
And like
EU
I
and
think this year might even be less.
for sure. And then you look at EU by contrast, like we're pulling rookies up from the French second division straight into LEC.
Yeah, so like I don't know, like maybe it is true. Like even if it's true that we have like less talent or whatever it is, like there still has to be some talent. The fact that we're gonna promote like probably two players from academy this year into LCS
How familiar are
is
you? Because
crazy.
I know you help out with Tier 2, so presumably you know some of the players. Are there any players you have your eye on in terms of like they've got the potential, maybe they're good enough now or they're going to be good enough? Who are some of those players you'd maybe want to
Um,
highlight from Tier 2? You could do some players some real favors here. A little seal of approval.
Give me some time to think, because actually I have to pull a U. I have to use the restroom.
Sure, go ahead. I'll entertain chat.
I'll be back in 2 minutes, 3 minutes.
Cool, sounds good. Oh, he's turned his camera off as well. He's taking a page out of my book. How are you enjoying the interview so far, boys? This will probably be cut out of the video. Um, but yeah, I think this is I think it's a good interview. I've enjoyed it so far. I feel like I've not quite gotten it. It's difficult though, isn't it? Because he's smarter than he lets on. He's not quite coming out and saying, "Well, fucking Yon was swearing at me," and like so and so didn't turn up to practice, and but he's navigating around it. But I still think we learned a lot, right? Mom will tell you anything you want to know. Stacy Mar 26, thank you so much. Give me the angle, APA's mum. How do I get him to open up? Like, what do you think he's hiding? You know your son so well. How do I unlock this shell? Because we went past, he's got this kind of just nonchalant, kind of ephemeral visage. How do I crack past it? How do you do it? What's the unlocker? He's always been a competitor and what he wanted to go pro well and then what he leads on. Ah. The trash talk that hurt him the most? Yeah, cool. I'll ask that. That's good. That's good. That's good. Good stuff, guys. We're getting some good assists here. We're getting some good assists. We love you. I love you, Imperial College, Stephen. You're one of the best UKL players I've ever seen. I'm the swearer, not the trash talker. I just beat it out of him, to be honest. Oh, that's good. Oh, that's class. Oh, that's amazing. It's my dad who did that mostly to me, to be fair. But you know,
Hello.
hello, welcome back. We've just had a brief word from your mum. Just as you were gone, she was
Okay.
typing in the chat. She said you were always a competitor, but I sort of asked her, like, in terms of your development, she's claimed that a lot of your attitude she beat out of you.
He tried.
That's like the most like threatening like white person response to that ever. Like, you know, the meme of like when your black friends come to your house and they see how you deal with like your white mum shouting at you. What do you mean by that, bro? What do you mean by she tried,
Well,
bro?
like no, like she would hit me, like, but like as like a like, literally she just tried, but it didn't work.
You're too strong.
Like
Were you a big kid? Like you talked about kind of you were like 40 pounds heavier. You told the spawn anecdote. Were you always quite big in school?
um, I was a lot smaller, but I was always very strong. Like I was very lean and strong.
Interesting. Okay, so it just shocked off of you. I remember very distinctly to share a bit of lore about me. Me and my dad would get into like somewhat physical altercations around the time that I was having a lot of issues with him when I was like 16, 17 years old. And there came a day where like so like no one is going to believe me saying this, but there was a period in my time where I was like really like quite physically fit. Like I was like a national level judoka on the judo team for London and British schools and stuff like that. And I was quite big, like I was like built at least. And I remember there's a time I got into a fight with my dad over like the remote or something, and he like squared up to me, and I literally just like picked him up and like threw him onto the sofa. So yeah, that was good. Doesn't really have any relevance to
N-
what we're saying, but I was kind of having
Nothing like that happened with
I
me.
was having a no, I wasn't saying you like put your mum in a suplex or anything like that, like like a booyaka 619, but I was having a bit of a power fantasy about the time that I had a physical fight with my dad, and you know, you brought me back into a dark place here, PA. Let's go back into
Well, to remind you what we talked about, you
yeah,
asked me about players who I think like can be like talked about. And I was thinking about it when I used the restroom.
yeah.
And I actually think there's a lot more than I've realized. I
Okay,
think there's at least like there's more than 10. But I genuinely
really?
think if they got a slot in LCS that they would at least hold their own. And you know, some might not be that good, but they'd at least hold their own. I think like for top lane it's like there's Fakeout, there's Quacker, there's Loki, that might
I
be it.
think you got to be careful with that. That's a slur amongst the dot community. Go to jungle.
Noted.
Yeah,
I think there's like Tomio, there's Krara for jungle.
Cry was good. I've had
Uh
an eye on him for a while. He's good.
um there's of course like Griffin and Yukino, who have like both been in other areas, but I think those guys were good. There's like Toasty, there's Samikin, there's Insanity for mid lane. I think ADC it's like Sajed and Scare Jerry. And like tactical, I think like supports like Cryogen. Like to be honest, I don't even know if the guy wants to play, but I think Zazel's still pretty good every time I watch him play in Academy. Um, like one of my previous supports as well, Psycho. I think he's also pretty good. Like there's generally a large list of players who I think could make it into LCS who just have literally like some of them have gone slots, you know, like Fake Odd or Insanity or Tactical, but like they farmed tier two enough to the point where I feel like they should be given a slot back, at least on a lower tier team, and they're just not. And like even the other players who haven't got a chance are just not given slots either.
Hmm. That's interesting. It's good to hear you give that spotlight to those players because I think it's so important. A question that someone had in the chat actually suggested, they gave me a little bit of coaching while you were gone. It was really good. What's the worst trash talk you've received in your career so far? Like, what are the words that's been typed to you that have pissed you off the most, if there
Mhm.
has been any?
I don't think there's any that like pissed me off to the point where I was like fuming or anything. Like the only times really anyone types back to me is like when Jensen was still in the league. Like Jensen would type back to me when he was on FlyQuest
What
last
kind of
year.
stuff was he typing?
He was typing. He was also going to interviews calling me dog shit. So that was pretty funny. I don't know if you recall what I'm referring to, but
Yeah,
it
no, I
was
think I remember a little
after
bit.
the upper bracket finals and they beat us. And he got interviewed and he was just completely shit talking me. I found that hilarious.
How do you react to that then? Is it like a thing where you're just like, well, I've got you. You've fallen into my trap now, or
Um, well, I thought it was funny. First off, because like, when's the last like that literally never happened this year at all for
yeah,
anyone to just like
it feels
publicly
like
go on an
stuff
interview
like
and just like
that.
trash talk someone.
They made the whole talk your split thing again around, and then it just like it became so
Disappeared.
forced. Yeah,
Yeah, it just disappeared.
and then the real Tokyo
Um,
split happened between Doklo and Popo.
okay, I guess that yeah, but that was like, in my opinion, more so Wupa just being socially inept in that regard.
It's one way of putting it, I
Like,
suppose. Yeah.
um, yeah, I think that's probably like the most favorite one that I can think of is Jensen shit talking to me in the interview.
Do you remember anything specific you typed to him to like really get under people's skin? I want to know that because you're a rage baiter like me, and I think so much of the art of rage baiting and making someone mad is knowing that certain things are going to get under people's skin. So what's your approach like to that?
I think a lot of it, like when I typed to him then, it was because this is at a time where I'm still a rookie, and I think he thought I was just dog shit. So I literally just type, "You're losing to me," like losing to APA or like solo code by APA, losing lane to APA or whatever. Like that's the entire approach I would take to him. And I know he wouldn't mute me because he'd like type back like some things every once in a while to me, and like I'm sure that's probably why he made the whole interview to flame me.
Do you
But
psychologically profile? Do you psychologically profile people though? Because if you're going to trash talk them, do you look at like maybe things that you know would annoy them? Because for me, I know that I psychologically profile people when I interview them because I get an understanding of who is this person, what kind of stuff do they respond to, like what line of questioning can I ask them. Like for you, for example, I know you're someone that like you don't like the idea of being worse than someone. So if I ask a question where it implies you're worse than someone, I'm going to get a more juicy answer out of you. So like, I wonder in terms of this trash talking, have you gotten to the stage where you're profiling people?
some people, yeah, like competitors in the league, I've done.
What have you learned
Like,
about people? What are your takeaways? Like, what are APA's
um,
psychological insights about people in the LCS?
well, I can't give those. I can't give those because if I just can't give those. I'm sorry.
Give us a little
Those are
tidbit,
my edge.
a little tease, a little tease.
Um, well, I guess I can do it like I said with Jensen, where like he like hated losing to a player who he thought was worse, and I knew that. So that's how like I typed to him. I just made it seem like I know I'm worse than you, but I'm still beating you.
Humanoid, you had a little bit of a typing back and forth with, didn't you? At Worlds 23, I want to say.
MSI 24, but
What was going on there?
um, I mean he's sort of the typical EU ego, even though he's dog shit. That's about it.
But you don't remember what was being typed?
To be honest, I didn't profile him as a person. Like the only thing I can remember about that match was like I was shit talking them in the restroom.
To his face.
I forget who exactly it was, but it was some of the not FlyQuest, Fnatic guys. Because we all had to use the same restroom at the MSI.
So you were shit talking them to their face. What were you saying to their face?
I think we were just up 2-1 in the series. And I was just laughing at them and calling their draft shit or whatever. Like nothing, like nothing of it was too like deep or anything. But it was just, we're in the same bathroom.
And how many of them were there? There was,
2 or 3 of them.
and just you by yourself.
Uh, well, I think it was the player bathroom. So like no people were there.
Be honest. Dick measuring contest at all, or not really?
No, because we were currently up in the series, and I think everyone was just trying to focus on winning the series.
That's fair. So you didn't take a peek or anything. Sorry, sorry, my bad. Um, moving on. I wanted to ask you about working on C9 now. If you could give me an idea of some of the
Yeah.
players. Are there players that you're kind of surprised that you're working with? Did you have an opinion of them that was preconceived that might have been challenged by the fact that you're on C9 now?
I mean, to be honest, I don't really know like much about these guys other than like the personas, I guess, or lack
Sven's quite a
thereof
shit talker as well, to be fair, right?
of what they give to like the public. But I think a person I'm surprised about working with is literally just Sven, like you just listed, like because he's also a person who's like maybe not as publicly as someone like Jensen, but he's like has shit talked to me and has like spoke negatively of me. And then like I don't speak with him too much still. Just like we haven't done anything in person yet. But sorry, I had a burp.
No worries.
Um, like we had like a fascinating conversation in our DMs with how like he was like advocating for me to join the team, and I was like just to be honest, like shocked to hear that from like what I pre-perceived him to view me as.
Did you say, like, are you sure? Like, I thought you'd, like, shit talked me and you didn't like me. Or did you have that moment of being, like, revealing that you thought that?
Nope, I just thought that quietly
Oh, so
because
he's gonna find that out by watching this.
he'll find that out by watching this.
And any other, like, preconceived relations? Or not really? I imagine probably not with Thanatos
Um,
but Blabber maybe. Like, Blabber's been around for years,
not
right?
really yet. Like I've had like brief interactions with some of the teammates. Like I had lunch with Blabber, I had lunch with an Arrow, but like Vulcan's in Canada, Thanos is in Korea, Sven's in Europe, so it's hard to have like
Sure.
bigger conversations. So I assume like I can give you a better response in like a month or two
But
after I get to know them all.
as players playing against them previously, you view these guys as like top competitors in the region, all of them? I suppose you're not going to
Oh,
say
for sure.
no, but give us a bit of
No,
context additionally.
I think even before joining C9, I thought like C9 just was a good team this year. They just choked. Same, like maybe had like a different reason as to why they failed to TL, but I thought they were a pretty good team this year.
And why are
They
you going
just
to be
ended
the
up choking
thing?
in playoffs.
Why are you going to be the thing that gets them across the line in comparison? Because that's what they're looking for. They're looking for something bigger this year. Why are you going to be the difference maker? Because the argument's sake would be you're on a team in TL where it's a bad environment and potentially you're a contributor to that. So why are you going to be the thing that gets C9 across the line?
I think because I've been able to get TL across the line, like in previous tournaments, one before they were also struggling.
And give yourself a chance to be egotistical here if it's potentially what you want to answer. But how much of when you talk about getting TL across the line, you put on yourself? Like, how much
I
lifting were
mean, I
you doing
think
at points? Obviously, it's a team effort, but how much credit do you give yourself?
uh, for the spring split last year that we won, I was like definitely feeling like it was a team effort. Like even though I got finals MVP, I think it was just like I just played how I normally did. I didn't play like particularly outstanding. I just played well. Jensen didn't play that well. But I think for the summer or the Brazil trip, I I honestly credit our turnaround in Brazil like personally to me because I had like countless like hour-long discussions with Swiffer about why our team's struggling when we were boot camping down in Brazil, and like I took a lot away from those conversations with him. So, and I think like me taking away a lot of those conversations and implementing those conversations into practice is why we started having some success, at least in my opinion,
Hmm.
when we were down in Brazil and able to win that trophy. It's like I credit a lot of that, like at least for myself, at least just like personal growth.
So that's what C9 signing.
Hopefully,
Fair. And talk to me about your
and
relation
more.
and more. What's the more? I'm giving you
Well, I
this
think
is really the chance for you to
well,
gas yourself
I
up,
I
you know?
think I think I took a lot away from this year, just how you have to view the game as a team and how I want to get more aligned with how like I regret not being able to get aligned as a team this year. Because like I said, I don't think we were just five bad players. I think we had five good players, just five different ideas.
And how ready are
So
you
I want
for,
to.
sorry, how ready are you for the systems? Because systems is very much the word of C9. It's about rigorous, not rigorous, but structure, the gym, all of this kind of stuff? Like, how ready
Well,
are you to?
C9 systems is like my entire life. It's like wake up, go to the gym, eat healthy. Like
Okay,
that's stuff I've done in sports all my life. That's you know, that's no
so
real different
you're a
than
culture fit then, from what you can
I would
tell.
say so.
Okay.
Like
Um,
from what they've shown me, it's nothing that's like fuck, I'm really gonna hate doing this.
mm, cool. And you touched on it a little bit, your relationship with Dom, kind of pre-context of working together, or not working together, but during together, but not knowing him too well. But your general kind of thoughts on the coaching staff, do you feel like they have ideas in common with you in the game? You feel like your philosophy is kind of in congruence, at least, generally speaking?
Generally speaking, yeah. I don't think I know like the full in and outs with how they view the game, but like for example, you know, a co-stream I would watch when I was watching LCS or LEC would be Dom. So like I like even if I like on some points I don't fully agree with how he views the game, I can see like why he views the game that way.
Could you tell us some of the points you don't agree with them necessarily on sometimes?
No.
Okay, fair enough. Cool, APA. I think that pretty much brings us to the end of everything. I wonder if the end of this, if any funny stories or crazy happenings from your last couple years or just any point in your time in league have come to mind. But if not, then I suppose we'll have to speak at the end of the next
Sorry.
year
Sorry. No, nothing too crazy that I can remember off the top of my head. We don't do anything too crazy. I just play League.
for sure. Any parting words you'd like to share with the fans for 2026?
Um, get in early on the bandwagon because I'm gonna win a bunch this year.
Oh, of course, I've completely forgotten about this. Thank you in chat for someone reminding me. How do you feel about playing in Kespa Cup? That's going to be happening.
Oh, that'll be fun. It'll be fun to play against the. Oh, it'll just be fun. Like I'm on joining a new team, playing a completely new tournament for me. That'll be fucking fun.
And you're excited to play against Korean mids? Because I suppose at that point it's,
The good ones.
oh damn, we're back to that, are we?
Gotta stay consistent.
Of course. I suppose at the end of this, let's just fire off some things if you're comfortable. You can tell me to fuck off if you want. Who are like, just tell me who are the bad players, man? Just like who are the worst players in the world? Like who do you think should be fired? Like let's just get through it, man.
That's another episode.
That's another episode. Completely understandable. Thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate you. Make sure when you turn off the camera that you talk to the TL trained sniper who's had a had a sniper trained on you this entire time. Have a good one, mate. I admire the courage in doing this interview in the TL facility. But thank you so much for coming.
Of course. See ya. It's a good
Peace.
interview.
Have a good one.